Chapter 433. Outside the foothills of Mount Degia, a carriage came from afar. The coachman was a young girl dressed as a servant. She was beautiful and pleasant, but there was a stitched scar on her neck that looked like intersecting canine teeth. The girl reined in the horse's reins and stopped the carriage at the foot of the winding steps. She jumped off the carriage and opened the door. Her voice was emotionless. "We're here." Dean came out of the carriage. He tightened his master robe and said to Gwyneth, "Let's stop the carriage here. Come with me." Gwyneth nodded and ran to the side. She broke a branch and inserted it into the grass. She tied the rope and turned around to follow Dean. Today is really a lively day. Dean walked up the steps step by step. The black snow accumulated on the ground, and the green grass was desolate and withered. He could smell the smell and the faint noise from the top of the mountain. There was a smile on his face. There were some castles on the way to the church mountain. There was no shadow of a person inside. In a blink of an eye, Dean came to the outside of St. Peter's Church. He saw that the vast square was filled with figures. He turned around and walked towards the stone corridor. "Get out of here, Edward. You are just a pariah. Get out of here. Master Dean won't choose you as a student even if you stand in front of him. Get out of here. The stench of your body is making me sick." As soon as he reached the corridor, he heard a quarrel coming from the outer edge of the corridor. He saw 4 or 5 blonde and elegant figures gathered together, trying to squeeze into a suitable position. There were 2 brown-haired teenagers next to him. One was handsome, and the other was mediocre with freckles on his face. At the moment, the 2 shrank together and looked at the others, not daring to answer. Dean glanced at them and wanted to withdraw his eyes, but he saw that the brown-haired boy was clenching his fists tightly. Dean's eyes narrowed as he turned around and walked over. "Get out of here. It's a gift to allow pariahs like you to come and study here. How dare you fight with us? Pariahs, are you not convinced?" Several blond boys looked at them with disgust. Their faces were ugly, as if they had been humiliated by the 2. Whoosh! Suddenly, a nimble figure appeared in front of them. It was Gwyneth. They were shocked by the sudden appearance of Gwyneth. Their eyes were attracted by Dean, who was behind Gwyneth. His luxurious golden robe was too conspicuous. "Master? Master Dean." They were confused. Dean didn't pay attention to them. He waved to the brown-haired boy. "Come here." The brown-haired handsome boy was a little stunned. He looked left and right, suspecting that he had misunderstood. He raised his finger to point at his nose and said, Mimi, it's you." Dean smiled. "Are you willing to be my student?" Hearing this, everyone was surprised. They looked at Dean with astonishment and then looked at the handsome boy. The handsome youth felt as if his brain had gone blank. It took him a long time to react, and he stammered, I? Are you not willing?" Dean smiled. The handsome boy knew that it wasn't a dream. I'm willing. Master Dean, I'm willing to do anything you want me to do. Come here." Dean beckoned. The handsome boy hurried over, but was blocked by the stone guardrail. "What's your name?" "My name is Edward." Dean nodded and gently flicked his sleeves. Gwyneth jumped out of the guardrail. She lifted Edward's shoulder and jumped back into the corridor. "Come with me," Dean said. He didn't look at him anymore and continued to walk along the corridor. Edward felt as if he was in the clouds. He was in pain. It wasn't a dream. He was stunned for a moment as he looked at Dean's back. He quickly chased after him. Gwyneth followed behind Dean like a shadow. The blond boy and others looked at each other. They were at a loss. Dean's figure appeared in the corridor. All the people crowded in front of the church steps looked at him and cheered loudly. Edward was nervous and cramped as he felt the enthusiastic cheers and gazes around him. He didn't dare to stay too close to Dean, but he didn't dare to stay too far away. His heart was pounding and his face was red. Although Dean didn't look back, he noticed the embarrassment of his new student. He smiled. "From now on, you are my student. In the future, you will go further than all of them. Don't be nervous." Edward was shocked as he heard Dadian speak. "Yes, it's master. Oh no, teacher. Do you know why I accepted you as my student?" Dadian asked as he walked. Edward shook his head blankly. He was just a little junior oracle with average talent, not to mention his family. Although he did not have to worry about food and clothing among the commoners and was relatively wealthy, Such conditions were definitely the lowest in the temple. He was a little nervous and said, "I don't know, teacher. Remember all the humiliation you have suffered since childhood. Do you understand?" Dean whispered. Edward's face slightly changed as he recalled the matter. He bowed his head. "I won't hate them, teacher." "You won't, or you don't dare?" "I don't dare." Edward hesitated for a moment, but answered truthfully. "Why?" Edward plucked up his courage. "We are all part of the temple. We should unite and love each other. They are nobles with noble blood. I can't hate them." Dean turned to look at him. "You can't, or you don't dare?" Edward looked into Dudian's eyes. He found that the genius master's eyes were very deep, like black stagnant water, but there was a mass of green in them. His heart beat wildly as he gritted his teeth. "I dare not." Dean slowly said, "As my student, you can't do anything that you don't dare to do. Do you understand?" Edward was stunned. Dean's eyes narrowed as he turned around. He knew that it was difficult for him to change his mind, but he wasn't in a hurry. Hatred was the seed of rebellion. As long as it was cultivated, sooner or later it would grow into a towering tree. He looked into the distance outside the cloister and could vaguely see the vast and imposing Sylvia giant wall. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. "You are here?" Skagen smiled as he saw Dean coming from the corridor. "You are right on time. It's almost 9 o'clock." The old man was surprised as he saw the two people behind Dean. "Who are these two?" "She is my attendant, and he is my new student. I hope you can take care of him in the future." Dean smiled as he introduced them. Abyssal was surprised as he looked at Edward. "He is just a primary architect. There are many senior architects who want to be your student. Why would you accept a primary architect?" Dean laughed. "It's too difficult for senior architects to change their profession. It's better to accept someone who has no foundation." Skagen nodded. "That's good. It makes sense." Arson sneered. "Master Dean is worried that he won't be able to teach the high-level architects. Studying magic depends on your talent, but teaching others depends on the accumulation of knowledge. Master Dean is still young. He is qualified to teach these low-level architects." Arson sneered at the side. Hearing this, the atmosphere suddenly became a little stiff. Dean looked at him and whispered, "Do you think that you don't have the talent for the invention?" Arson's face slightly changed. "Are you insulting all the masters? Don't think that you can be arrogant just because you have made a legendary invention." Dudian whispered, "Isn't it too despicable for you to force hatred on me? I advise you not to do stupid things like provoking me in the future. Otherwise, I don't mind kicking you in front of everyone. I believe that no one can stop me if I want to." Arson's face changed as he looked at Dean in anger. "You! How dare you?" Skagen and Abyssal tried to persuade him. Skagen looked at Dean. "Today is a big day for you to teach. Don't lower yourself to his level. That's his temper." Dean didn't pay attention to them as he smiled at Arson. "Since you asked me if I dare or not, I will give you an answer." He flicked his sleeves. Gwyneth's eyes flashed with a hint of hesitation, but she still moved. She appeared behind Arson as if she teleported. She lifted her foot and kicked his ass. Bang! Arson's body flew out and fell into the crowd below the high platform. It immediately caused an exclamation. The dense crowd spread out like a tide and gathered again to catch him. Skagen, Abyssal, and others' faces changed as they ordered people to go and help him. "I'm sorry. My men are not sensible." Dean flicked his sleeves and said to the crowd, "It's time for the lecture. I'll go first." Then he turned and stepped onto the platform. Gwyneth followed behind him. "This man has a temper." The square-faced old man looked at Dean's back as he stroked his beard and muttered. Skagen glared at him. "You're still gloating." The old man laughed. "Evil people will be punished by evil people." Edward, who was standing at the side, was dumbfounded. The Grand Master in his eyes was actually kicked off the stage by his own teacher's follower. It was just a verbal conflict, and he dared to act like this. He was simply too hot-tempered. Chapter 434. Wow. Everyone in the square cheered as Dean stood on the high platform on the steps of the church. Dean took a deep breath as he looked at the crowd. He knew that this was the key moment for the establishment of the gas faction. He waited for the crowd to quiet down a bit. First of all, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Dean. I'm 16 years old. I'll be 17 years old after the black snow season. I know that people will despise my age, but Mr. Smorgo was only 19 years old when he painted the Saint of the Mirror. Mr. Elliot was 14 years old when he played the first great piece of music, Moonlight. Mr. Curtis was 28 years old when he wrote The Art of War. Everyone quieted down as they heard Dean's words. Skagen, the old man, and others looked at each other. They didn't expect Dean to bring up the most famous figures in history for comparison. They couldn't help but sigh. They knew that Dean's purpose was to make people think about the fact that he produced the first legendary item, new textile machine, when he was only 16 years old. In the same year, he produced the second legendary item and opened up a new system of items. Every great work will be criticized by people when it comes out, Dean slowly said. But I hope that stubborn things like age and seniority won't affect your judgment of things. The audience was silent. Dean continued. Today I'm going to give a lecture, but in fact I'm going to discuss with you. I believe that everyone is curious about the gas faction. Many masters have mentioned about it in the past few days, but it's inevitable that they are too esoteric. Today I'm going to talk about the origin and application of the gas faction. Hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up and they perked up their ears to listen. Skagen, the old man, and the others were concentrating on Dean in the distance. The key to the gas faction is the gas faction, just like the metal faction is the key to the metal. Dean said in an orderly manner, there are two things in the 9 great inventions that are inseparable from our lives. The first one is air, and the second one is water. At this point, there was a commotion below the stage. The people present included the 9 major systems. Dean's words had undoubtedly lowered the position of the other systems. It was difficult to accept. Skagen and the old man's complexion slightly changed. Although they were masters, but they belonged to different factions. No one thought that their faction was inferior to other factions. Even Abyssal always believed that lightning faction was the truth of the world. Dean felt the restlessness in the atmosphere. The reason is very simple. First of all, let's take the lightning faction as an example. Will we die immediately if we leave the lightning faction? The answer is no. Will I die immediately after leaving the metal magic? I won't. What if I don't use wood magic? Without these magic, our lives will only be a little worse, but we won't die immediately. Hearing this, many people felt a little better in their hearts, but they were still somewhat unconvinced. Master Dean, according to you, we will die immediately if we leave the air and water divine incantations? How is that possible? Someone in the crowd shouted loudly. The speaker was a young man. He had no intention of changing the direction of his research to study air magic. He had only come to listen to this genius master's lecture and see what amazing things he would say. He didn't expect that after a few words, he would be infuriated half to death. Yes, I don't believe it. There were voices of agreement from the crowd. Dean raised his hand and waited for the crowd to calm down. We can verify it. First of all, what is the gas? As you can see, the most important thing is the air. Now you might as well cover your nose and mouth with your hands and refuse to breathe air. See how long you can last. Hearing this, everyone could not help but look at each other. Some of the primary architects in the crowd covered their noses when they heard Dean's words. However, some of the senior architects and intermediate architects didn't do so. They felt helpless as they knew what Dean was going to say. No one could live without air. Dean continued after a minute. You should understand now that you have verified it. Perhaps some of you will think that the role of air is to help us breathe. What is there to study? How can it compare to the mystery of the metal? How can it compare to the mystery of the lightning? How can it compare to the value of the wood faction? Many people in the crowd nodded slightly and looked up at Dean to see how he would answer. Dean smiled. Yes, the gas can't be used to make textile machines like the wood faction, nor can it be used to make swords like the metal faction. Everyone was stunned and felt a trace of strange. Dean had the most right to speak when it came to textile machines. Dean slowly said, the gas isn't a physical thing, so it can't create metal and wood faction, but it is a substance like lightning. It can create destructive power that metal swords can't match. You should understand this point from the steam gun. Perhaps some people think that the power of the steam gun depends on the metal bullets. Yes, the real way to kill the enemy is the metal bullets. But if there is no gas, then the metal bullets are nothing. Dean looked at the crowd. Have you ever thought about it? What if the steam gun didn't eject metal bullets, but something bigger? For example, our carriage. Carriage? Everyone was shocked as they heard Dean's words. Skagen, the old man, and the others were stunned. Suddenly, their eyes burst into light. If the gas can push the metal bullets, then why can't it push the carriage? Dean looked at the crowd. Please imagine if you cast a huge carriage. You don't need horses to pull it. You just need to install 2 jets at the end of the carriage. The carriage will run faster than the horses. What kind of picture would that be? The audience was silent. Everyone was stunned. Some of them fell into contemplation. Dean didn't give them time to think. Does anyone have a bolder idea besides the carriage? Bolder? Everyone was puzzled as they looked at Dean's confident expression. It was already shocking that the carriage didn't rely on the horses. Wasn't it bold? Chapter 435. Fly to the Sky. Those 3 simple words silenced the entire place. Skagen, the old man, and others were shocked as they looked at the figure on the high platform. They felt as if a window had been opened in their minds. They suddenly felt as if they had touched a vast world. It must be known that ever since the emergence of the gas theory, the masters of various fields had paid attention to it and studied it. They were very clear that the kinetic energy produced by gas would produce wonderful changes in various fields in the future. Although they knew that qi would become a big knowledge in the future, but they didn't dare to imagine that humans could use the kinetic energy of qi to fly to the sky. Flying. This was the ability of the gods in the Bible. The giant wall of Sylvia shrouded the world. Flying meant that humans could cross the giant wall. Humans who lived on the ground couldn't even think about flying to the sky. However, Skagen and the others knew that this kind of thing wasn't absolutely impossible. The square was silent. Dudian continued. We all know archers. Archers shoot arrows and hit the enemy. The arrow is in the flying state. If we make something that is 100 times bigger than the bow and use people as arrows, can we make people fly? The elastic force of the bowstring is the driving force of the bow, an arrow. The steam of the steam gun is the driving force of the metal bullet. We can walk and jump because of the power generated by the body. Humans can run faster and jump higher if the power is strong enough. Dudian slowly said, It isn't difficult for humans to fly to the sky if we can cleverly use the power generated by qi. This is the charm of the qi faction. Imagine that in the future war, we can fly in the sky with the help of the qi faction while the enemy can only stay on the ground. How can the barbarians outside the fortress survive? If we can fly, then we can even cross the giant wall and travel to the distant world outside the giant wall. Everyone's mind buzzed as they listened to Dudian's clear voice. It was as if they had seen a new world. Flying. This was something they had never dared to think about. But what would the future be like if humans could fly in the sky with the help of the invention? Some architects' eyes lit up. They were full of excitement. Although Dudian didn't come up with strong evidence to support his theory, but as a legendary master, he was able to put forward such a point of view. Most importantly, such a point of view was extremely advanced. They had never thought about it and didn't dare to think about it. Master, can we really use the invention to fly in the sky? Someone in the crowd couldn't help but ask. Yes, Master, we are so heavy. Can we rely on the thin air to help us fly? Dean smiled as he heard the shouts. Do you know about kites? Kite? Everyone was at a loss. Some scratched their head as they felt that it was familiar. Dudian continued. It's a small invention that was born more than 100 years ago. Unfortunately, it wasn't popularized because of some reasons. If you're interested, then go to the library to find information about it. You will understand that it isn't difficult for us to fly in the sky. But don't underestimate the seemingly weightless air. Some people were surprised as they heard Dudian's words. They were ready to go to the library to find the magic kite that Dudian had mentioned. Skagen, The old man and others were full of admiration as they heard Dudian's words. Kite? Why did he suddenly mention this forbidden technique? He is too bold. This is a forbidden thing. Didn't anyone remind him that the forbidden technique can't be publicized? Several masters frowned as they looked at Dudian. Some of them were worried for him, while others felt that Dudian was talking too much. Dudian was about to continue to introduce the basic knowledge of the air element. Suddenly, a figure rushed out from the corridor on the side of the square. Assassin? Enemy attack? Dudian turned around and saw the figure. He was surprised. It was much faster than Gwyneth. Whoosh! The 100-meter distance was covered in the blink of an eye, and the figure stopped on the high platform, motionless, as if he had been standing there since the beginning. He was wearing a white robe, and the material of the white robe was soft, without any unnecessary decorations. Half of his shoulder was exposed, and he was holding a wooden stick in his hand. At the end of the stick was a dazzling gemstone the size of a baby's fist. The gemstone was crystal clear, and it could cause countless noble ladies to scream. The sudden appearance of the figure caught the attention of the audience. Everyone was surprised. They didn't see when the stranger arrived. They only felt that there was one more person on the platform. Gwyneth's pupil shrank as she stood 3 meters behind Dudian. She put her hand on her dagger and stood in front of Dudian to protect him. Her palms were full of cold sweat. Same from the inner wall. Skagen, the old man, and others were shocked when they saw the figure that suddenly appeared. They didn't expect a saint to suddenly appear here. They were bewildered for a while. Shameless boasting. The blonde youth glanced at Gwyneth, who was in front of Dudian. He didn't continue to pay attention to her. He coldly stared at Dudian. You have stolen the power of the devil. You have made contributions to the temple. I will give you a chance to live. Apologize and leave with me. Dudian narrowed his eyes. Who are you to talk nonsense? The blonde youth's eyes flashed. Don't look for death. Dean's face sank as he looked at him coldly. A lot of people like to talk to me like that, and now they are dead. Saint! Saint! At this time, several voices echoed from the side. Skagen and other masters trotted over. They shouted loudly as they arrived in front of Dudian and Gwyneth. Saint, why didn't you inform us that you had come from the inner wall? We would have come to greet you. Inner wall? Dean's eyes narrowed as he heard the words of Skagen and others. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he gloomily stared at the blonde youth. Many things flashed through his mind. The blonde youth was about to make a move when he saw Skagen and others. He frowned and said in a cold voice, I have arrived yesterday. This person has been bewitched by the devil. I have been ordered to capture him and send him to the monastery to be purified. Skagen and others were stunned. They turned to look at Dudian and then at the blonde youth. Skagen quickly said, Saint, is this a misunderstanding? Dean is a new genius master. He has not only created the new textile machine, but also other high-level inventions. Recently, he has created the legendary steam gun. He donated it to the military and helped us to win the barbarian war. How can he be related to the devil? The square-faced master and several other old men also spoke out in support of Dean. Dean didn't expect Skagen and others to protect him. He was surprised but felt a trace of warmth. He secretly thanked them for their kindness. Chapter 436. The blonde youth snorted as he heard the words of Skagen and others. The inner wall already knows about the new legendary item. It's a taboo technique and the power of the devil. A genius has fallen to the point of using the devil's power to earn fame. It's simply arrogant to proclaim the devil's power and blaspheme the grace of God. Skagen and others were startled. Dudian said in a cold voice, The devil's power? How can you say that my new divine incantation is the power of the devil with just one sentence? What a joke. What evidence do you have? In my opinion, your words are the biggest blasphemy to the God of light. Shut up, the blonde youth shouted. His figure suddenly moved, and like a falcon spreading its wings, he pounced on Dean to capture him. Gwyneth's face slightly changed as she pulled out the dagger from her waist. Get lost. The blonde youth didn't show any mercy as he pounced on Gwyneth with his stick. Bang! The stick moved like a gust of wind as it hit Gwyneth's wrist. Under her shocked eyes, the dagger in her hand was knocked out and fell into the crowd. At the same time, he stepped forward and pressed his palm on her shoulder. Bang! Gwyneth's body flew out and fell more than 10 meters away, rolling on the ground. Come over. The blonde youth didn't stop after he sent Gwyneth flying. He raised his hand to grab Dean's shoulder. Dean's eyes flashed with anger. The moment he was about to grab him, he fiercely punched out. Bang! The fist hit the center of his palm, and a tremendous force surged out. The golden-haired young man's expression suddenly changed as he felt the incredible surging force in his palm. He hurriedly shook his wrist, wanting to release the force, but it was too late. A light cracking sound came from his palm joint, and his body that was rushing forward suddenly fell back. He took a few steps back on the high platform and looked at the black-haired young man in front of him with a face full of shock. Dean retracted his fist and looked at him coldly. Are you a saint or a bandit? You want to arrest me? Please give me an explanation. We have painstakingly studied the new item, and you want to take us away with just a few words? Ridiculous. His voice was cold, but there was a trace of anger and killing intent in his heart. This matter was beyond his expectations. Suddenly, a strong person from the inner wall had come to arrest him. But the most important thing was that he had inexplicably provoked the people from the inner wall. The strength of the saint was obviously higher than that of a senior hunter. He dared to capture the master of the temple in front of so many people. It could be seen that the force behind him was extremely powerful. He didn't care about the holy church and the temple of elements. The blonde youth felt a burst of pain in his arm. He secretly endured the pain as he looked at Dean. Sure enough, a dignified master of the temple has such a strong power. You better come back with me for interrogation and confess the power behind you. Otherwise, I followed the will of the God of Light to study the invention. I'm innocent. You don't have any evidence, and you want to arrest me? Do you think you can do whatever you want in the outer wall, just because you are from the inner wall? Dudian pulled up the tiger's skin as he added on to the others. Skagen and others didn't expect things to become so stiff. They couldn't help but complain about the blonde youth's way of doing things. They would have nothing to say if the blonde youth wanted to arrest Dean in secret. But at the moment, he wanted to arrest Dean in front of more than half of the temple's architects. It put them in an awkward situation and made them lose their prestige. Lord Saint, could there be a misunderstanding? You have to give an explanation if you want to arrest Master Dean. Skagen bit the bullet and said. The old man next to him said, Yes, Master Dean is a legendary master of the temple. You have to say how he colluded with the devil. Otherwise, it will be hard to convince the public. Yes, yes. Shouldn't you give an explanation? The others echoed. They were masters and didn't want to get involved in this mess. But the blonde youth's actions had undoubtedly embarrassed all the masters. The blonde youth's face turned gloomy as he heard the words of Skagen and others. Although he didn't put the masters in his eyes, but he knew that there would be some trouble if he wanted to arrest Dean in public. If Dean didn't talk about flying and other taboo things, then he wouldn't have made a move midway. He would have waited for Dean to finish talking. Moreover, he wanted to capture Dean as it would save him a lot of time. He would leave the rest of the matter to the temple. He was only responsible for capturing Dean. He didn't expect that the weak architect would have such a strong strength. He was injured because of his carelessness. He is an architect, but he has such a strong strength. Isn't that evidence? The blonde youth said in a gloomy tone. The people who were waiting for the blonde youth to speak were speechless. Saint, Master Dean is not only a master, but also a knight of the Knight's Hall. It isn't unusual for him to have such abilities. It has nothing to do with the devil's power. The Knight's Hall can testify to this. Skagen explained. Knight? The blonde youth's face changed. Dean was paying attention to the blonde youth. He saw the subtle changes in the youth's face. He narrowed his eyes. It seemed that his identity as a knight was able to make the blonde youth afraid of him. Could it be inferred that the Knight's Hall also had influence in the inner wall? Yes, Master Dean is an honorary golden knight of the Knight's Hall. He helped us repel the barbarians and save countless civilians. He is a great hero, the old man next to him said. The The blond youth was startled as his face turned ugly. He didn't think that the orders conveyed to him would involve the Knight's Hall. Moreover, it seemed that the reputation of the youth in the outer wall was much higher than he had imagined. The crowd was stunned as they looked at the conversation between Skagen and the others. They didn't dare to interrupt or make any noise. No one would shout in support of Dean. Even a fool could see that the blond youth who suddenly appeared had a distinguished status. He wasn't someone they could provoke, especially when it came to the devil's matter. The blond youth was silent, thinking quickly in his heart. Judging from the current situation, taking Dean back by force would obviously cause a backlash from the temple. Although he did not particularly care about this matter, there was a trace of concern in his heart. But the most important thing was that, judging from the fight just now, if Dean stubbornly resisted, he might not be able to arrest him by force. Moreover, the Knight's Hall was involved in this. Chapter 437. No wonder this old man didn't say anything this time and let me take him away so easily. There was a trace of anger in the blond youth's eyes as he thought about the reaction of the Temple Lord yesterday. The other side knew that this matter involved a great deal. If he forcibly took away Dudeen, then it would inevitably cause dissatisfaction from the Knight's Hall, and the temple would rebound. It would even cause a very bad impact on the outer wall. However, he didn't know what to say to give a reasonable explanation. He was just an executor. He only knew that Dean was arrested in the name of colluding with the devil to violate the divine right. Other things had nothing to do with him, and it was not within the scope of his knowledge. Skagen and others looked at the silent blond youth. They continued to persuade him. The situation was in a deadlock. After a long silence, the blond youth slowly said, "Everyone as God's messengers. Have you forgotten the dogma in the Bible? The God of light controls the sun and the sky. This is the domain of God, but this person wants to fly to the sky. This is a violation of God's power, and his sin cannot be redeemed. Does this not prove that he colludes with the devil and has the intention to rebel?" Skagen and others were startled by the words. Dean's eyes narrowed as he heard this, but his heart was a little relieved. He said in a cold voice, "Saint, why are you so sure that flying in the sky is a violation of the divine right, and not a right that the God of light has specifically given to us humans? Could it be that in your heart, the God of light is selfish? Your words are the real blasphemy." The blond youth angrily said, "The sky is the domain of God. How can we humans touch it? Since ancient times, no one has been able to set foot in the sky. Only the devil has been trying to violate the divine right. Do you know that your words are the greatest disrespect to the God of light?" Dean sneered. "The God of light isn't as selfish as the saint thinks. The God of light gave us the right to make inventions. Moreover, I was able to comprehend the mystery of the air faction. All of these were given by the God of light. Why are you saying that he is colluding with the devil? This is slander and disrespect. You." The blond youth was so angry that he clenched the wooden stick. Skagen and others stood in the middle to dissuade them. Skagen looked at the blond youth. "Saint, Master Dean is right. If we can create an invention to fly in the sky, then it will be easy to kill the monsters outside the giant wall. Moreover, we can completely eradicate the barbarians outside the fortress. How can the devil do such a good thing?" When the blond youth heard this, he was so angry that he rolled his eyes and said, "You old fools, this is all an illusion created by the devil. Once we violate the divine right, let's not talk about whether we can eradicate the barbarians or not. The moment we step into the sky, the gods will be shocked and angry. They will send disaster and punishment. This is not something you can bear." Skagen and the others hesitated when they heard this. The domain of deities cannot be trampled by anyone. This is disturbing the divine authority. If you all continue to persuade him, then you are harboring him. The golden-haired youth continued. The blond youth continued, "I don't want anyone to trample on the god's domain. If you continue to persuade me, then you have to show evidence." Dean saw their expressions and suddenly realized how deep their reverence for God was. He considered his words and said, "Saint, I don't object if you want to arrest me, but you must show me the evidence. Since the day I stepped into the temple, I've been studying and studying the scriptures. I've created new legendary items by my own efforts. You don't have any evidence, but you say that I'm colluding with the devil. I can't accept it. The blonde youth snorted. You are trying to touch the domain of God. That is the biggest evidence. Dean was waiting for these words. He faintly smiled. If mastering the ability to fly represents a violation of the divine right, then I would like to ask the saint whether archers violate the divine right. They have mastered the ability to make arrows fly. Then I would like to ask if we jump from the ground is a violation of the divine right. How many meters should we jump from the ground? If there are no rules, then wouldn't it be too much to say that I have colluded with the devil? The blonde youth's face changed. He was about to open his mouth. Dean continued. Moreover, I am an honorary knight of the Knight's Hall. I believe that the saint knows how strict the quality of the Knight's Hall is. If you want to arrest me, then please ask the Knight's Hall to convict me. Of course, before that, I still need the magistrate to carry out an investigation and find evidence of me colluding with the devil. Otherwise, wouldn't it be too chilling for me to be wrongly accused just because of a single sentence from you? How can we study the new items in the future? Who would dare to be an oracle if I accidentally discover some new divine skill and you accuse me of colluding with the devil without any evidence? Skagen, the old man, and others nodded as they heard Dean's words. Although they knew that Dean was deliberately inciting them, but they couldn't find any fault in his words. If the saint had evidence, then they would have nothing to say. But to arrest a master without evidence was really bullying. The crowd in the audience heard Dean's words and looked at each other. There was a small disturbance. The blonde youth's eyes were filled with anger as he felt the change in the atmosphere. He bitterly looked at Dean. The Knight's Hall, magistrate, and even the Holy Church wouldn't stand idly by. Things had become a bit complicated. The most important thing was that he couldn't arrest Dean by force. He could only rely on negotiations. But when did he learn to negotiate? The blonde youth looked at Dean. If you haven't colluded with the devil, then why are you afraid to go back with me for investigation? Dean replied, When have I ever been afraid of being investigated? First, you wanted to arrest me in the name of colluding with the devil. I am obviously innocent, so why should I accept the accusation? Second, you said that I will be investigated? In that case, you don't have any evidence in your hands. Since you don't have any evidence, I'm just a suspect in your eyes. Since that's the case, I'm happy to cooperate with the investigation. However, I'm currently in the middle of a lecture. Not only did you suddenly interrupt me, you even injured my attendant and tried to forcefully arrest me. Isn't this how you should treat a suspect? The golden-haired youth was slightly stifled. He suppressed his anger and said, Since you are willing to cooperate, then leave with me now. Dean saw that the blonde youth ignored the other words. He sneered. You are a saint, but you injured my attendant and tried to arrest me by force. Shouldn't you give me an explanation? Don't tell me that we, who are dedicated to the study of magic, are nothing in your eyes? The blonde youth was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Do you want an explanation? That attendant came out and got in the way. He was already being merciful by not killing him on the spot. Moreover, his arm was still trembling in pain. He hadn't even asked for an explanation, but the other party actually dared to shamelessly ask for one. What explanation do you want? If you had cooperated, how could your attendant have been injured? The blonde youth angrily said, A trivial attendant dared to offend me. I didn't hold you responsible, but you want me to give you an explanation? Dudian indifferently said, My attendants are loyal. Who told you to rush over without reporting your identity? I thought that the Dark Church wanted to assassinate me. The blonde youth was too lazy to argue with Dean. Now that things are clear, you will leave with me and go back for investigation. If you're innocent, then I will naturally send you back. You should treat people like you are treating people, Dudian said. First of all, you suspect me, but I haven't seen any evidence of your suspicions. According to the law of the magistrate, when a person is suspected, there must be physical evidence or witness involved in the case. I would like to ask, what is the evidence of your suspicions? If there is no evidence, then you will take me back for investigation and waste my precious time. Isn't that too unreasonable? You, The blond youth's eyes flashed with anger. He saw that the boy didn't intend to go back with him. The more he talked, the bigger the advantage the other side had. His weakness had been grasped by the other side, and that was the evidence. He didn't have any evidence in his hands. But the inner wall didn't need evidence to arrest people. However, the person he wanted to capture this time was not someone he could take away with brute force. He could only rely on his glib tongue to get evidence. And this point, he did not have to say. It would only make it more and more far-fetched. The blond youth took a deep breath and restrained his anger. He coldly stared at Dean. I advise you to obediently go back with me for investigation. Otherwise, when I bring the evidence, it won't be an invitation anymore. Is this a threat? Dean chuckled. I also advise you to arrest people based on evidence. Don't act like a bandit assassin. Good. The blond youth deeply looked at him. You will regret it. Finished speaking, he suddenly turned around, tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, and dashed along the corridor, disappearing in front of everyone in the blink of an eye. Skagen and others looked at the direction where the blond youth left, and then turned to look at Dean. They couldn't help but smile. What was the matter with this farce? Dean narrowed his eyes as he looked at the back of the blond youth. The smile on his face slowly disappeared. He turned around and looked at Skagen and others. Thank you, masters, for your help. I'm very grateful. Today's lecture has been interrupted. I'm in no mood to say anything else. I'll take my leave. Skagen and the others comforted him. Don't think too much. We all believe you. Since this is a misunderstanding, I believe it will be solved. Chapter 438. Everyone, I'm very sorry. Today's lecture is over. Dean looked at the crowd in the square. I will publish the basic knowledge of the gas faction in the Temple of Exchange. Those who are interested can exchange and read it. In addition, as I said before, I will accept a few students to spread the gas faction. Anyone who is willing can come to the place where I live. Dean slightly bowed. Dean didn't care about the commotion in the audience as he walked down the stage. He came to Gwyneth and saw the blood on her mouth. Are you still holding on? Yes. Gwyneth bowed. Dean nodded and turned away from the corridor. Gwyneth followed him. Edward was startled. He hesitated for a moment, but trotted to catch up. After leaving the square, Dean saw that there was no one around. He turned around and picked up Gwyneth's body. Hurry up. Gwyneth didn't expect Dean to suddenly pick her up. She instinctively raised her hand to block him, but she couldn't exert any strength in her arms. She whispered, Master, I can walk. Your ribs are broken and your organs are bleeding. You will get more injured if you continue to walk. Dean said in an indifferent tone, Are you shy in a life and death situation? Gwyneth was startled. She didn't know how Dean knew that her ribs were injured. She bit her lips, but didn't say anything. She let Dean carry her as he ran. Gwyneth felt as if she was walking on flat ground. Her body was extremely stable. She looked at Dean for a moment, but soon recovered her eyes. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Dean reached the foot of the hill. He saw the carriage parked on the roadside. He put Gwyneth on a soft chair. He turned around and saw the figure of his new student trotting on the hillside. Gwyneth was sweating and out of breath. His figure flashed and ran in front of Edward. Without any explanation, he clamped Edward's body and turned around to descend the mountain. Edward could only feel the scenery around him whizzing past him at lightning speed. He was so frightened that his face turned ashen. The strong wind in front of him made it difficult for him to breathe. But in the span of a few breaths, the whistling sound came to an abrupt stop. His vision stabilized, and a large horse appeared in front of him. He was so frightened that he cried out. Dean put him on the ground. Get in the car. Edward reacted and hurriedly entered the carriage. Dean jumped into the carriage and personally acted as the coachman. He pulled the rope and drove the horse back. Dean picked up Gwyneth as they returned to the castle. He looked at Noyce. Go to the military and call the best doctor. Noyce, seeing that Gwyneth was not well, jumped up with fright and hastily pulled a horse from the stable, mounted it, and galloped away with a shout. Dean came to the hall and put Gwyneth on the sofa. He looked at the location of her wound. There was no sign of the injury spreading. He was a little relieved. You stay here and rest. Don't move. Then he called Crone. Call everyone to prepare for the meeting. Crone saw that Dean was in a hurry to return. He knew that the situation was not good. He nodded and ran to inform everyone. Dean saw Edward coming out of the gate and said, "You go to the training ground to play." Edward felt that his teacher was in a bad mood. He didn't dare to touch the bad luck of his teacher. He nodded and turned away. A few minutes later, everyone in the castle gathered in the hall. Dean's eyes swept through the crowd. Something happened today. Sergei and Nicholas saw Gwyneth lying on the sofa. They realized that the situation wasn't right. Sergei couldn't help but ask, "Didn't you go to teach? Was there an assassination attempt on the road?" Dean looked at him but didn't answer. "The people from the inner wall slandered me for colluding with the devil. They want me to go to the inner wall for investigation." "What?" Sergei, Glenn, Dennis, and Mason's complexion greatly changed. They were shocked. Artemis, who was young, was at a loss. Yvette, who was on the other side, had an indifferent face. She didn't learn the language of the wall, so she didn't understand what Dean said. She wasn't interested in it, but her eyelids twitched as she saw the reaction of Sergei and others. Dean quietly looked at everyone. "They don't have evidence, so I have dismissed the matter. But it is only temporary. I think they will come again soon. Maybe I will have to go to the inner wall with them." Sergei, Glenn, and others looked at each other. They didn't expect that their peaceful life would suddenly take such a turn. Dean continued, "This time I have offended the people from the inner wall. They are likely to find a reason to deal with me. You will be implicated in the future if you follow me. So if you want to leave now, then leave. I won't make it difficult for you." Hearing this, everyone exchanged glances with each other. Their gazes flickered and their thoughts were indeterminate. "We believe you," Mason, who was standing next to Sergei, said. "It's too despicable for them to slander good people. Don't say that you didn't collude with the devil. Even if you did collude with the devil, so what? You helped us to repel the barbarians. How can they do this to you?" Dean shook his head. "I don't want to implicate you guys. I won't go," Mason said. Dean looked at him and nodded slightly. The hall was silent for a moment. Dennis slowly said, "Master, I'm sorry. I don't want to get involved in such a thing." Dean calmly said, "I understand." Dennis hesitated for a moment and said, "If you can survive this disaster and need me in the future, I'm willing to come back. I hope you can forgive me." "No problem," Dean replied. Dennis glanced at the others, sighed, and turned to leave. Glenn looked at his back as he left. She wanted to say something, but hesitated. She sighed. "Is there anyone else?" Dean looked at the crowd. "If you don't quit now, then you won't have a chance in the future." Everyone was silent. Dean was relieved as he saw that the crowd didn't speak again. He was prepared for Dennis to leave. After all, they didn't have any friendship. They just relied on the balance of the contract. Dennis didn't have to work for him. "Dean, I'm sorry." A weak voice echoed as Dean was about to open his mouth again. Dean's heart sank as he heard the voice. He looked at the person who spoke. It was Sham. Mason, who was standing next to Sham, was surprised as he saw Sham's hesitation. He angrily said, "Sham, what do you want to say? Are you going to leave too?" Sham was roared by him. His body trembled and slightly bowed his head. "Sham, you can't do this." Zach hurriedly persuaded him. Dean deeply looked at Sham. He never thought that the second person to choose to leave would be one of the three of them. He wouldn't be surprised if Nicholas or Sergei left. But Sham was a person he had experienced life and death with since childhood. He was also the one he trusted the most. Disappointed? Heartache? Dean looked at Sham, who bowed his head. He suddenly understood that time could change everything. It could heal the pain and hatred. It could also heal the great love and friendship that was sung about in poems. But if all of these could be healed, then what was the meaning of immortality? Chapter 439. Crone wanted to say something, but hesitated. He finally bowed his head and went upstairs. "Dean," Macon hurriedly said. "Sham is just confused for a moment. I won't let him go." After saying that, he turned around and grabbed Sham's collar as he angrily roared, "You bastard! Did you forget who saved you in the desert during the scavenger trial? Who helped you when you were in danger? Don't forget that you still owe us your life. Otherwise, you will be more than a cripple." Zach stretched out his hand to stop the impulsive Macon, but hesitated and stopped. You actually left at this time. Are you worthy of Dean? Are you worthy of us? Macon grabbed Sham's collar. His voice was full of anger as it echoed in the silent hall. Dean slightly frowned and was about to speak to stop him. Suddenly, a low laugh sounded from Sham's mouth. Macon was stunned. Sham pushed away Dean's hand and broke free from Macon's hand. But he used too much force and lost his balance. He fell to the ground. His face was in close contact with the ground. He slowly climbed up with the help of crutches. No one could see his expression. He whispered and said, "Yes, if it wasn't for you and Zach, I would have been poisoned to death. If it wasn't for Dean, I would have died." He slowly raised his head. His face was already covered in tears, but he still smiled and said, "But I would rather die back then than become a cripple." Macon was startled for a long time. He suddenly pulled Sham's collar and growled, "What are you talking about? What's wrong with being a cripple? Don't you still have a life? Are you blaming me and Zach for being nosy?" Sham silently hung his head. After a moment, he turned to Dean's direction and whispered, "Dean, I'm sorry. I owe you. I can't repay you in this life. I don't want to get involved in the struggle. I just want to live a stable life." Dean deeply looked at him. He slightly raised his hand to stop Macon from continuing to speak. He slowly said, "Everyone has their own ambitions. We used to be brothers. I don't blame you if you want to quit. I wish you a happy life in the future." Sham lowered his head and clenched his fists tightly. Tears slipped from his cheeks to his chin and fell to the floor. His shoulders slightly twitched. He took a deep breath and bowed deeply to Dean. He ignored Crone, who just came down the stairs, and handed him gold coins. He turned and walked out of the hall. Mason and Zach were stunned in the same place, looking at his back disappearing little by little outside the door. Their eyes were red and somewhat moist. They knew that this time, their many years of brotherhood will be completely cut off. They supported each other during the special training. They helped each other during the trial. They lived and died together. The blood and the passion were still vivid in their minds. Dean silently retracted his eyes and looked at the others present. "Is there anyone else who wants to leave?" Nicholas secretly glanced at Dean. When he touched the corner of Dean's eyes, he felt that Dean was glancing at him. He quickly retracted his eyes and bowed his head. "It's not too late to leave now." Dudian continued. There was still silence in the hall. There was no echo. Dean turned to look at Nicholas and Sergei. "Are you two going to stay and die?" Sergei shrugged his shoulders. "I have no place to go anyway. My old life was bailed out by you. I swear to follow you," Nicholas said in a well-behaved manner. His words were much more beautiful than Sergei's. However, he secretly cursed in his heart. If they left, then they would be killed on the spot in the blink of an eye. He knew that Dean allowed Dennis to leave because Dennis hadn't been in the castle for a long time and didn't know much. As for the other kid, he was Dean's childhood companion and didn't touch any secrets. But they were different. After they were bailed out of Thornflower Prison, they followed Dean and participated in many things. If they left at this moment, then they would be killed because of their understanding of Dean's character. Dean looked at Nicholas, the old fox. "In that case, we are on the same boat. I hope you have the determination to die." Glenn sighed and said, "If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have agreed to your invitation. But now that I have agreed, I will help you. Just tell me what you want to do. We hunters have long been accustomed to life and death, so it's not a big deal. Besides, the battle hasn't even started yet, so it's not certain who will die." There was a smile on Dean's face. "Yes, it's not certain who will die." Nicholas carefully asked, "Master, do you have a plan?" Dean pondered for a moment. "This time they came to arrest me, but I blocked them. Next time they will send more people to arrest me, so I can only follow them and go to the inner wall. They won't dare to hurt me because of my identity as a master, and I'm a golden knight of the Knight's Hall." Mason asked, "What if they are unreasonable?" Dean looked at him. "This is what I'm worried about, so I need your support. If I don't come back, then you will follow my plan. Gather your strength and prepare to attack the giant wall. If necessary, destroy the entire giant wall." "Destroy the giant wall?" Everyone was shocked. Dean nodded. "There are more masters in the inner wall than you can imagine. They can easily kill senior hunters like you. So if you want to attack the inner wall, you can't rely on your own strength. You can only besiege Wei to rescue the besieged." Besiege way to rescue the besieged? Everyone was puzzled as they heard the strange words. In short, they will use other things to pin down the main forces of the inner wall and then rescue me. Dean continued. Of course, this is the worst-case scenario. If they investigate and prove that I'm not colluding with the devil, then they will release me. Glenn nodded. You have a distinguished identity. They won't hurt you if they don't have conclusive evidence. But it's better to be prepared just in case. Yes. Young master, how do we know that you're safe and sound inside? What if you're safe inside and we attack? Wouldn't that harm you? Nicholas asked. Chapter 440. Sneak into the inner wall. Everyone was shocked as they looked at each other. The high wall of the inner wall had been isolated from the outer wall for more than 200 years. Countless nobles wanted to climb over the wall, but were blocked. But Dean had a way to sneak into the inner wall. This was something that nobles didn't even dare to think about. Dean didn't elaborate, but looked at Crone. Give me a pen and paper. Crone handed over the pen and paper. Dudian quickly wrote on the table. After a moment, a large number of words appeared on the snow-white paper. He waved to Nicholas. Go and collect some plants. Hire some fields to cultivate them. Remember to do it secretly. Don't leak any information. Otherwise, even if I don't want your life, the magistrate and the Holy Church won't spare you. Nicholas took the paper, but his fingers trembled as he heard Dudian's words. Young master, what kind of plants are these? Ordinary plants, Dean indifferently said, but they will become unusual in the future. Nicotine was startled as he looked down. He saw familiar names of the plants. Mulberry leaf? Isn't this ordinary weed? Why are you planting it? These are treasures. Dean inserted the quill into the pen holder. You are fully responsible for this matter. Hire your own people and take care of the relationship. You will take the main responsibility if there are any problems. I will ask Noyce to assist you in managing the plants. I don't need to teach you how to manage the people and the industry. Weeds are treasures? Nicotine was at a loss, but he realized that there was a lot of knowledge in it as he looked at Dean's serious expression. He knew that Dean had arranged Noyce to assist him in order to monitor him. Dean trusted Noyce more than Nicotine. It showed that the task Noyce was responsible for wasn't as simple as planting plants. It was estimated to be an extremely dangerous task. Dean told Nicotine to go to the study room to discuss the details. The task he gave to Nicotine was the most important part of his plan. Mulberry leaf was the name of this world. But in the old era, it had a resounding name. Marijuana. That's right, it was marijuana. In his plan, he wanted the people of the outer wall to help him attack the inner wall. But he didn't have enough power to incite them. As for money, wealth could make people crazy, but he didn't have the wealth to buy the entire outer wall. After all, the forces that had been around for decades were intricate and complex. They were bound to encounter a lot of obstacles if they wanted to rise suddenly. However, drugs were different. They were as scary as a virus. Moreover, the speed at which poison spreads and ferments are extremely shocking. It can cover an extremely wide area in an extremely short period of time. Most importantly, the people enslaved by drugs were far more reliable and crazy than wealth, power, faith, and so on. Any drug addict would be unable to resist the temptation of addiction, and this was worth giving up everything, including their families and even their own lives. Dean was glad that the previous disaster had destroyed the city and the biosphere, but almost all the harmless plants had been preserved. Although some plants had changed due to radiation, viruses, and other unknown factors. They had turned into demonic plants and were more threatening than monsters. But most of the plants had retained their original appearance. The mulberry leaf was only one of the ingredients he had provided. There were other addictive plant ingredients that were no less harmful than the mulberry leaf. Sergei, you're responsible for teaching Gabriel and Artemis. Macon and Zach are also responsible for fighting. Dean continued. At the same time, recruit talents and set up a mercenary knight regiment. I will officially incorporate you as my squire. As a squire of a golden knight, you have the legal right to recruit your own squire and set up a knight regiment. Knight Group was an exclusive combat team that was conferred by the Knights Hall. The number of people in the group was determined according to the Knight's rank. Mercenary Group was similar to the Adventurer Team in slums and residential areas. But Adventurer Team was regarded as a civilian group. Their spirit of contract was low and they were not legal. Mercenary Group was different. They belonged to a formal team. The contract signed would be recorded in the magistrate's files. Retinue. Sergei didn't expect the surprise to come so suddenly. As a retainer of a Golden Knight, his status was naturally much higher than a hunter. Even though he was a senior hunter, but in the end he was still a shady existence. He was limited by the consortium, so he could only enjoy a small part of the privileges of the consortium. But a retainer of a Golden Knight was different, especially a retainer of a Golden Knight. In the eyes of the nobles, once promoted by their own knight, they would quickly turn from a retainer to a regular knight. Glenn enviously looked at Sergei. "Master, can I also be your retinue?" Dean looked at her and nodded. No problem. He would let her go to the inner wall to pass the message to him. She would have the identity of a retainer as a cover. Sergei calmed down as he saw Dean agree with Glenn so easily. He asked, "Master, is the Mercenary Knights set up to support you? What is the name of the Knight Group? How many talents should we recruit? You are responsible for this. Gwyneth and Glenn will join the group. You will be the captain for the time being and assist Sergei. But your main responsibility is to pass the news that I'm in the inner wall. If Sergei wants to act arbitrarily, then I'll give you a letter and you have the right to cancel his order." Dadian continued, "Although the Mercenary Knights are under my banner, but from now on you will be the deputy head. Gwyneth and Glenn will join the group." Glenn was stunned for a moment, then happily said, "Yes." Sergei said with a bitter face, "Young master, with you here, how can I dare to act arbitrarily? You think too highly of me. You have to guard against people's ambitions." Dean indifferently said. Sergei's mouth twitched as he shook his head. Dean waved to Gabriel and Artemis. Both of them came to him. Gabriel looked at Dean nervously. There was a trace of fear in his eyes. Although the boy had learned to hide his thoughts, but under Dean's experienced eyes, he was still able to see through it. He stroked Artemis's little head and said to Gabriel, "Do you know why I brought you back?" Gabriel was startled. "I don't know." "Because you are orphans," Dadian slowly said. "If you had stayed in that town, then you would have become food in the belly of barbarians or even a pile of feces." Gabriel's face turned pale as he clenched his fists. He had been learning how to read and write in the castle. He had asked Crone and the others about the situation outside the Golden Wall. He knew that Dean wasn't lying. Because of this, he was able to endure Dean's harsh requirements for him to practice swordsmanship because he was grateful. However, he felt a bit of fear every time he saw the boy who brought him back. It was as if he was facing a natural enemy. "I asked Sergei to teach you how to practice swordsmanship and read books. You have to study hard." Dean patted Gabriel's shoulder. "Although I saved you once, but if you follow me in the future, it will be more dangerous. If you don't work hard and aren't strong enough, then you will repeat the same mistakes again. No one can save you, and you can't save your sister. Do you understand?" Gabriel bit her lips and said, "Young master, I know." Chapter 441. Guests. Crone was startled, but quickly left the hall. Dadian looked at Sergei and others. "You guys go and prepare yourselves. In addition, the members of the Knights don't need to be examined in terms of quality, as long as they are strong enough and you can discipline them." "I know." Sergei nodded. Everyone left. Dadian turned to look outside the hall. A group of people came over under the leadership of Crone. Dadian didn't move as he didn't need to greet many people with his current status. Soon, these people came to the living room. Most of them were dressed luxuriously, with jade, agate, and other luxurious accessories on their necks or fingers. In their eyes, this was not just showing off, but a symbol of status and politeness. They were all nobles, and among them, there were a few figures dressed in the attire of oracles. Dadian knew the intention of the visitors. He waved to Crone. "Pick out 9 people from the list of people who gave away parasitic soulworms." Add them to my list of students and hand them over to the temple. Let the rest go back. By the way, the people who gave away rare parasitic soul worms and rare parasitic soul worms must be included in the list. I know, Master. Crone respectfully retreated as he saw that Dudian didn't have any other orders. Dudian rubbed his head as he felt tired. He gently rubbed his fingers and pondered for a moment. He picked up the pen and wrote another letter. It didn't take long for Noyce to return with a carriage with the military flag. There were 2 military doctors in the carriage. They quickly came to the hall. "Greetings, Master Dean." Both of them respectfully saluted as they saw Dudian. Dudian didn't have the mood to chat. He asked them to hurry up and treat Gwyneth. "Noyce, go to the Knight's Hall and give this letter to them," Dean said to Noyce, who didn't stop his horse. Noyce nodded as he picked up the letter and left. After a moment, the 2 doctors finished treating Gwyneth's wound. They wrapped a layer of gauze and said goodbye to Dudian. "Are you feeling better?" Dudian looked at Gwyneth, who was sitting on the sofa. Gwyneth's face was pale as she whispered, "Thank you, Master. I'm much better. I'll take you and Glenn to the inner wall when it's dark. Take a good rest." Dean handed her a small bottle. "This is the healing ointment from the temple. The effect is good. Apply it first." Gwyneth glanced at it, took it, thanked him, and went upstairs. Dean looked at Gwyneth's back as she went upstairs. He suddenly thought that if he went to the inner wall for inspection, then he would have to eat and drink a lot of food. The black snow season hadn't passed yet, so he had to eat high-calorie food to maintain his body temperature. He might not get the same treatment in the inner wall. Dean called Crone. "Go and hire a chef. Remember to pick randomly. Don't let anyone find out. Also buy a month's worth of ingredients for my menu. Let the chef dry them and turn them into dried food and bacon. It doesn't matter if the taste is bad, as long as it can be preserved for a long time." Crone understood, quickly agreed, and turned to leave. There's still too few people. Joseph and Barton have gone to the Holy Church and military. Now, it's almost time to participate in the interview. Dean's eyes flashed as his fingers subconsciously rubbed as he thought. It was noon in the blink of an eye. Noyce rushed back to the castle and looked at Dudian. "Master, the Knight's Hall asked me to bring you a letter." Dean, who had just finished his lunch, quickly read the letter. His tense heart was relieved. Sure enough, the Knight's Hall was reliable. According to the letter, their people in the inner wall would intervene in the review process to ensure the fairness of the review in order to preserve Dean's innocence. It seems that the monastery in the inner wall is inextricably linked with the Holy Church. The saints of the monastery dared to directly go to the temple to arrest a master-level saint. Such behavior is undoubtedly a slap to the face of the Holy Church. But the Holy Church didn't say anything. Instead, the Knight's Hall came forward. Dudian's eyes lit up. There were only 2 possible reasons for this. First, the power of the monastery in the inner wall was far stronger than the Holy Church. Secondly, the Radiant Monastery and the Radiant Church were one and the same, and had a subordinate relationship. Otherwise, if they were offended by other forces that were not too different from them, anyone would fall out with them. Thinking of this, Dean's eyes were filled with anger. Judging from various factors and names, he was inclined to the second possibility. In the end, the first one to stand up and mess with him was actually the force he relied on. Light Church? What a light church! Dudian narrowed his eyes as he thought of the Dark Church. If there was an organization similar to the Dark Church in the inner wall, then wouldn't he be able to take advantage of it? However, he didn't know anything about the situation in the inner wall. He only knew that there was an organization of the Dragon Clan and the monastery. He remembered the Dragon Girl's promise to him. If he went to the inner wall, then he could rely on the Dragon Clan. However, the Dragon Clan may not be willing to protect a newcomer and offend the monastery unless he exposed his divinized splitter magic marks. But who knows if there would be a way to transplant other people's magic marks to the inner wall. If there was such a method and he exposed his secret, he would be sending food to the Dragon Clan instead. Time passed. Dudian spent the whole afternoon thinking about the follow-up plan. At the same time, all the forces from the outside world got the news and sent condolence letters. Dudian didn't have time to read the letters. But when Crone was about to throw them into the garbage bin, he had an idea. He ordered Crone to sort out the letters. If you don't have enough money or you need connections, then you can choose from these letters and ask them for help. If anyone doesn't agree, then tell them that I'll pull them down if something happens to me. These letters are the best evidence. Hearing this, Crone was stunned for a long time. He stammered, "Young master, if you come out in the future, who would dare to get close to us?" Dudian replied, "As long as I'm able to produce a new invention, then they will come. Moreover, didn't you see the number of condolence letters? If it wasn't an accident in the inner wall, but I was injured or some other trivial matter, then the number of condolence letters would explode the mailbox. There are people who are bold enough to send charcoal in snowy weather. Let me remember them. It's a good time to make use of them." Crone was dumbfounded as he listened to Dudian's words. How could he turn around and use them? If you really want to help, then he will help. If you don't want to help, then he will send a letter of condolence. Remember this. Dudian waved his hand. "Go and do your work." The corner of Crone's mouth twitched slightly. He smiled bitterly and turned to leave. The sky was getting dark. Dudian went upstairs to see Gwyneth after dinner. "Are you feeling better?" "Much better." Gwyneth got up from the bed and wanted to get down. Dudian said, "Let's take a break and we will leave in half an hour." Gwyneth nodded. She lifted the quilt and got out of bed after Dudian left the room. In the hall, Dean looked at the clock on the wall. It was almost 8 o'clock. In the area where he lived, there was a curfew at 8 o'clock. Only in some prosperous areas where the nobles and the rich were concentrated, the curfew time was 9 o'clock. The treatment of the rich and the poor was always highlighted. "If someone comes to visit, then tell them that I'm resting," Dudian said to Crone. Chapter 442. "I know, young master." Crone was worried. "Will it be dangerous for you to sneak into the inner wall?" "I'll be careful." Dean smiled and looked at Gwyneth and Glenn. "Are you ready?" "Everything is ready," Glenn said in a serious tone. Dudian nodded and went into the carriage. Gwyneth and Glenn followed him. Noyce jumped in front of the carriage and acted as the coachman. They drove the carriage away from the castle and gradually disappeared into the night. The carriage went into a remote wilderness under Dean's command. Dean asked the two girls to get off the carriage. They saw a figure standing in front of the woods. It was Sergei, who had been waiting for them for a long time. "Master, the horses are ready." Dudian nodded, got on the horse, and rode away. Glenn and Gwyneth, each riding a black horse, followed closely behind. After galloping to a remote place in the suburbs, Dean abandoned the horse and walked through the hills and woods with the two girls. It didn't take long for the outline of the giant wall to appear in his line of sight. He glanced at it and sped up. Soon they arrived at the bottom of the giant wall. "Give me the rope," Dudian said to Glenn. Glenn quietly swept over like a ghost shadow. She untied her backpack and took out a bundle of rope from inside. Dean took a deep breath and unzipped the back of his armor. Transparent and thin wings stretched out. Each thin wing was like transparent skin, extremely soft, but after stretching, it was like a sharp blade, exuding cold air. Glenn and Gwyneth's pupils shrank as they saw the wings on Dean's back. They finally knew why Dean was able to sneak into the inner wall. It was too easy for him to climb the giant wall if he had wings that were evolved from magic marks. "Wait for me here." Dean grabbed the rope and ran to the top of the giant wall. He used the power of his wings to climb the steep wall as if it was flat ground. Since he had become a senior hunter, he felt that his wings were more powerful than before. In the blink of an eye, he reached the top of the giant wall, which was thousands of meters high. Dean untied the rope and threw it down after he landed. Gwyneth and Glenn were still in shock. They didn't wake up until the rope fell down like a snake. They looked at each other and pulled the rope. They saw that Dudian's end was tied firmly. Then they carefully climbed up the rope. They didn't dare to be as fearless as Dean, especially after climbing to a height of 200 or 300 meters. Their hearts were hanging high, for fear that the rope would break or the other end would loosen. If they fell from this height, even if they didn't die, they would be seriously injured and disabled. A moment later, the two of them climbed up the giant wall using the rope. After landing, they were still in a state of shock. However, they were soon shocked by the scene in front of them. The spacious giant wall and the sky above their heads made them feel like they were in a dream. The majestic giant wall was a sacred symbol in their hearts. They never thought that they would be able to climb it one day. Dean put away the rope. You will have to rely on this rope in the future. Remember to change the route frequently so that no one can track you. He threw the rope on the ground and ran towards the inner wall. Gwyneth and Glenn followed him. They looked down the wall from time to time as they ran. There was an indescribable feeling of shock and excitement as they looked at the scenery of the nearby area. After half an hour of full speed, Dean once again came to the inner wall. He was about to pass directly, but suddenly his eyes narrowed and his face slightly changed. He saw that there were some figures moving on the high wall. He quickly squatted down. Glenn and Gwyneth were scared and quickly squatted down. There is someone. Dean made a gesture and secretly looked up. He saw that on the wide high wall, there were two figures moving every few hundred meters. They seemed to be patrolling. Gwyneth and Glenn didn't dare to make a sound as they saw Dean's gesture. There was a trace of tension in their eyes, although they had experienced life and death, but this time they were sneaking into the noble inner wall. Their pressure had doubled. Strange. There was no one on the wall the last time I came here. How come there are people on duty today? Did I expose something last time? Did the inner wall specially send people to increase the defense line? Dean frowned as he was puzzled. Suddenly he thought a key point. The last time he came here it was at dawn, but now it was the curfew time. Perhaps at dawn, the people on the high wall would retreat. Dean waved to the two of them. He applied plant stone powder to eliminate the smell and continued to move forward. Dean could see more and more clearly as he got closer. The people on the wall were wearing uniforms and carrying weapons. Their body heat was almost the same as senior hunters. Although their body heat was slightly inferior to Gwyneth and Glenn's, but the gap was not big. In addition, when he passed by the high wall, he suddenly saw some steel ladders nailed to the wall behind the high wall. Rather than saying they were steel ladders, they looked more like steel hoops. There was one nailed every 10 meters, making it difficult for ordinary civilians to climb up. It seems that they didn't send people because of my appearance last time. The edge of the ladder is embroidered. So every night, the inner wall will send people to patrol the high wall. It seems that I'm not the only one in the outer wall. There are other forces that want to sneak into the inner wall, but it will be difficult to do so under the watchful eyes of so many senior hunters. Dean was relieved. He asked Glenn and Gwyneth to sneak away from the wall. They passed by the giant wall. The people on the wall didn't notice them. Most of them didn't think that someone could climb the giant wall, which was thousands of meters high. The three of them had officially stepped into the territory of the inner wall after passing through the high wall. Glenn couldn't restrain the excitement on her face as she saw the scenery of the inner wall. Gwyneth was much calmer. Wait, Dean made a gesture. He sniffed the floor and smelled the smell of plants mixed with soil. In addition, there was also the smell of perfume. He looked carefully and his face suddenly changed. He whispered, "There are people patrolling on the giant wall. We have to go down quickly." Glenn and Gwyneth were surprised. They didn't expect that other people from the inner wall could climb the giant wall, which was thousands of meters high. Did they have special abilities? Dean asked Glenn for another set of ropes. He threw it from the wall and looked around. There were no red dots. Only a few hundred meters away, there were a few long red spots in the grass. Most of them were hiding beasts. Go down. Glenn and Gwyneth quickly slid down the rope. Dean took the rope and jumped down. Dean spread his wings to slow down when he was 200 or 300 meters away from the ground. Squat down, Dean said to both of them in a hurry. They quickly squatted down. Dean looked at Glenn. Dig a hole. Glenn didn't say anything as she pressed her hands on the ground. If one looked carefully, they would find that there was a limb next to her little fingers that looked like an underdeveloped finger. This limb was curved like a sharp bone spur. As she dug the soil, this curved sharp blade quickly and easily pushed away the hard stones and other objects in the soil. In just half a minute, Glenn had dug a half-meter deep hole. Chapter 443. Dean and Gwyneth curled up into a ball and squatted in a small pit. Glenn stretched out her hand and poked the soil. She wanted to create a small passage for Dean, so that he could observe the outside and breathe at the same time. Dean felt the movement and quickly grabbed her hand. At the same time, he controlled his heartbeat to beat at a very low frequency. His breathing was completely controlled. He was like a stone sculpture. Glenn and Gwyneth were shocked as they felt Dean's abnormality. Both of them weren't rookies, so they immediately followed suit. They squatted in the soil and didn't move. It was as if they were one with the soil. Dean's head was up and his eyes were closed to prevent the sand from falling into his eye sockets. Although his eyes were closed, but he could still see everything outside. This was a method that he had mastered after advancing to senior hunter. It was to close his eyes to see through things. His eyelids couldn't block his observation. He saw a faint red light, like a firefly, floating in the distance. The speed was not fast. As the distance got closer, the intensity of the red light became brighter and brighter. When it came to the giant wall about 2 or 3 kilometers in front of him, Dean felt like a huge human lantern was coming. The whole body was blazing hot, like a burning man. Dean was shocked. His brain quickly diluted his emotions so as not to cause any changes in his body. He instinctively felt like he was being stared at by a beast. He had never seen such exuberant physical heat before. Glenn and Gwyneth's heat was like a firefly compared to the starlight. This heat was much stronger than his own. Although heat couldn't absolutely represent the physique, but in most cases it wouldn't be wrong to judge based on heat. Only a few of them were related to magic marks. The exuberant figure came to the top of the giant wall next to Dean and the others. It seemed that it was looking around. After a few minutes, it went straight to the inner wall. After more than 10 minutes, the figure returned along the direction of the inner wall. Its speed wasn't fast. It seemed that it was taking a casual stroll. The figure didn't stop after passing over the heads of Dean and Gwyneth. It went further and further in Dean's line of sight until the figure was like a tiny spark. It was faintly extinguished by the black tide. Dean was about to sigh in relief when he saw the weak heat figure stop. It didn't go far nor return. Was it resting in the same place? Dean wanted to slightly replace the oxygen in his lungs. Suddenly, his eyelids twitched as he thought of a possibility. His pores shrank as he sealed his breath. 7 or 8 minutes passed. The weak heat figure suddenly moved like a falling meteorite. It rapidly expanded towards the direction of Dean and others at an astonishing speed. Dean's heart jumped. Whoosh! The figure came to the top of Dean and the others. It didn't stop for hundreds of meters before it stopped. It looked around the giant wall for a moment, but found nothing. It paused for a moment, and then slowly returned along the original road until the figure completely disappeared from Dean's sight. Even the slightest heat couldn't be seen. Dean's dizzy brain relaxed as he saw this. He drilled out of the soil and gasped for fresh air. He looked at Gwyneth and Glenn. Gwyneth, you know the inner wall better than us. You lead the way. Glenn, you return the pit back to its original state. Glenn asked keenly while filling in the soil. Did someone just pass over our heads? I felt a terrible panic. Dean nodded. It was a very strong person. He was stronger than all of us combined. He should be far stronger than a senior hunter. He looked at Gwyneth. You are a disciplinary officer in the inner wall. Do you know what is above a senior hunter? Gwyneth looked at him and whispered, I have been studying in the Disciplinary Institute, so I don't know much about them. I heard that they are called limitless beings. They are very strong. They are as terrible as our keeper of order. They are all monsters. Limitless? Dean and Glenn's eyes narrowed as they secretly remembered the name. Come with me, Gwyneth said as she led the way. Dean and Glenn immediately followed her. There is something in the grass about 200 meters in the direction of 3 o'clock. It should be a beast. I smell blood. Glenn whispered. I can feel it. Gwyneth whispered. It's not a beast, but a monster. The inner wall is different from the outer wall, although it occupies 80% of the area of the giant wall, but the total population is only half of the outer wall. 70% of the area is wilderness. There are many monsters. The nobles of the inner wall live in the central area and never go out. Monsters? Glenn was surprised. Dean was startled as he heard Gwyneth's words. In his impression, the inner wall occupied most of the soil and quality resources. It should be 100 times more prosperous than the outer wall. The history of the aristocratic families in the outer wall was on the surface. Their ancestors were from the inner wall, but were later expelled for some reason. It made him subconsciously think that the inner wall was overcrowded and the expelled aristocrats were the ones who were eliminated. He didn't expect the opposite to happen. The population of the inner wall wasn't full. On the contrary, it was extremely scarce. The vast soil was abandoned. There were no civilians to plant and cultivate. It was no wonder that all he saw around him was wilderness. The monastery is a very strong force in the inner wall. It is equivalent to the holy church in the outer wall. Gwyneth whispered. Besides the magistrate, there are also aristocratic forces and the devil's army of the ruler of the giant wall. There are also the devil families. The disciplinary institute that I mentioned before is another institution under the magistrate. It is the place where we train our disciplinary officers. There is a trace of gratification in Dean's eyes as he saw that Gwyneth didn't respond to his request. Gwyneth's identity as a member of the inner wall was important to him when he bailed her out. He knew that once he could tame Gwyneth, then he would be able to understand the general face of the inner wall through her. When one knew nothing, it was also the time when one's heart was filled with fear. It was only a matter of time before he would set foot in the inner wall. Gwyneth was an intelligence agent that he had prepared in advance. After the appearance of the saint today, he wanted to ask Gwyneth, but he held back because he could see that although this girl followed him, she didn't really surrender to him. In such a dangerous situation, she didn't take the initiative to help him, so it was useless to force her. Even if he used force, it would be futile. Instead, it would backfire. After all, Gwyneth's body was pierced with steel nails. She was in pain every night. She had suffered inhuman torture in Thornflower Prison. Thornflower Prison had spent a few years to tame her. Her bones were hard, and her temper was stubborn. He was glad that he didn't use hard means, but soft means. Gwyneth was willing to take the initiative to talk to him. Although he wasn't clear whether she had surrendered to him, but at least he knew that she didn't have a strong aversion to him. So the inner wall is controlled by 5 major forces? Dean asked in a low voice. Gwyneth nodded. Yes. Although there are 5 major forces on the surface, but there are factional frictions in each force. The aristocratic forces can be subdivided into many pieces. I understand. Dean had some experience in politics after the tempering of the outer wall. Is there no dark church in the inner wall? Gwyneth didn't even turn her head. Her tone was a bit indifferent. No, but there is something more abominable than the dark church. In other words, the evil here is 100 times more abominable than the evil of the dark church that you know. He had made up more than a dozen chapters in March, and there were still more than 20 chapters left. He had said that he would finish by April at the latest. This month he had to make up 45 chapters. He would start from tomorrow. Chapter 444. Dean felt a trace of hatred in her tone. He thought of the things that happened when she was in prison and became silent. Whoosh! Gwyneth led the way in front of them. They avoided most of the monsters that were hiding in the bushes. After more than 2 hours, they had covered a very long distance. It was equivalent to crossing the distance from the fortress to the inner wall. Even so, they were still surrounded by endless wastelands and rolling mountains. There were also lush forests and deep dark lakes. Stone Magic Valley. Gwyneth's eyes lit up as she looked at a steep cliff. Found it. This is the Stone Magic Valley. The central area of the inner wall is in front of us. The monastery is also there. We can't continue forward as there are limitless people guarding there. They have all kinds of magic marks and abilities. It would be difficult for us to sneak in with our hiding methods. Dean followed her gaze and saw a vague outline of a rock on the cliff. It seemed to be naturally mixed, but the outline looked like a Buddha. Its eyebrows were stained with moss, which made it look somewhat ferocious. Dean was startled as he didn't expect to see a Buddha statue here. Buddhism had never appeared in the giant wall. It should have been replaced by the Holy Church. Most of the statues were left from the old era. He looked at Gwyneth. How can we determine the location of the message if we can't go to the central area? I'm sorry, Master. Gwyneth bowed her head. We can only contact from here. We will be exposed if we continue to move forward. The limitless monsters are guarding the central area. Not to mention us. Even mature, rare monsters would find it difficult to sneak in. Of course, if there were mature, rare monsters in the inner wall, then they would have been killed long ago. Dean frowned. All right, I'll find a way to pass the message here. You just need to accept it. We'll talk about the specific method later. Both women nodded. Take us around and familiarize us with the surrounding terrain. Dean said. Tonight's task had been completed. Gwyneth had told them about the method to sneak into the inner wall. Gwyneth had also told them about the location of the inner wall. Gwyneth nodded. She took Dean and Glenn to wander around in the vicinity. They turned back when the sky was getting dark. Along the way, Glenn sprinkled lime powder from time to time, and sometimes replaced it with sulfur powder. Duddian knew that her black weaver magic marks gave her a perception of the smell of rocks. It was a special kind of olfactory perception, specifically for ores and soil. Dean smelled a rotten smell mixed with a fishy smell as they passed by a lake. His pupil shrank as he pulled Gwyneth and Glenn. He looked towards the direction where the smell came from and saw a strange scene. He saw a row of humanoid figures standing in the middle of the forest through the leaves of the forest. Based on the thermal vision he was already familiar with, even though he could only see heat, he instantly knew that there was a group of people standing in the forest. There were more than 100 people in the queue. Dean's pupil shrank. How could there be hundreds of people standing in the middle of the forest in the middle of the night? Could it be that they had tracked their scent and came here to ambush them? The next moment, Dean's face changed. His whole body was covered with goosebumps. He saw that in the lake in front of the team, a huge red ball suddenly gushed out. The red heat burned the whole lake into a sea of fire. The surging heat was frighteningly strong, more than 10 times stronger than the figure on the giant wall he had seen before. The most important thing was that the shape of the heat ball was extremely huge. It was like a ball with a diameter of at least 40 to 50 meters. What kind of creature was this? The biggest monster Dean had seen was the splitter, but it was only a circle bigger than the thing in the lake. Was it another legendary monster? Moo! A low roar came from the lake. It sounded like a cow, but also like a thunder. The next moment, Dean saw the hundreds of people in the forest rush towards the lake. Ambush monster? The next second, Dean overturned this idea. The team of 100 people rushed into the lake and merged with the huge red heat creature. Judging from their movements before they disappeared, all of them directly jumped over. How could they jump directly into the lake in the face of such a giant monster? Wasn't that courting death? Sending food. An electric light flashed in Dean's mind, and he was stunned in place. He looked up and saw Gwyneth anxiously looking at him. Gwyneth gestured to the other side. It meant that they should leave immediately. Gwyneth took the lead and stealthily sneaked away. When Glenn heard the strange roar, she felt a trace of palpitation in her heart and followed closely behind. Dean didn't dare to neglect and quietly followed. In the blink of an eye, they were 4 or 5 miles away from the lake. What is that thing? There was a lingering fear in Dean's heart. Such a huge creature gave him a sense of oppression. Gwyneth's face turned ugly. I'm not sure, but if I'm not mistaken, we should have entered a monster research area by mistake. This area is the Monster Research Institute's territory. We must leave immediately. Monster Research Institute? Dean was startled. What kind of force is it? I'm not sure. I've heard that it has something to do with the monastery and the nobility. Some people say that it is under the direct command of Aristotle. Gwyneth gently gasped. In short, it is a force that can't be provoked. They are a group of devils and perverts. They specialize in the research of monsters. The monsters in the wilderness of the inner wall have escaped from their research area. His Majesty Aristotle? Is he the ruler of our giant wall? Dean's face slightly changed as he thought of something. The monster atlas of the outer wall has always been provided by the inner wall. Is it the Monster Research Institute? Yes. Gwyneth gasped and nodded. Everything related to monsters was made and produced by them, including the armor and weapons of the first hunters. Even the disgusting life weapon was made by them. They can do anything, and they dare to do anything. There was once a person who came to the Monster Research Institute for help, wanting to cure his sister, and the Monster Research Institute agreed. Chapter 445. Dean finally knew the reason why the team of 100 people had lined up by the lake. Those people lined up in the woods were waiting for the appearance of the monster in the lake. Then they would throw themselves into the bait. Dean's eyes were gloomy. The Monster Research Institute uses humans as fodder to raise monsters. The heat in their bodies is comparable to that of an intermediate hunter, but they volunteered to become the rations of the monsters. If it was only one or two, then it could be understood that they were being coerced by the Monster Research Institute. But there are hundreds of them, 100 people at a time. What kind of amazing number would it be if it was 10 times or 100 times? From this point alone, Dean could feel the terrifying means of the Monster Research Institute. Even if he used drugs to control addicts, he may not be able to drive so many people to voluntarily die. Moreover, they died in such a horrible way. No wonder there are only 9 major systems in the temple. But I didn't see any architect or God's blessing. The consortium said that it was given by the temple, but the temple got it from the Monster Research Institute in the inner wall. Dean was startled. The temple got it from the Monster Research Institute? Doesn't it mean that the temple will regularly come to the Monster Research Institute to collect it? There were people coming and going. It meant that the inner wall wasn't an absolute isolation. If there was a gap, then there would be a chance to sneak in. If there is no way to climb the giant wall, then perhaps it is possible to sneak into the inner wall from the team that regularly collects the blessings. Perhaps this is the unspoken rule that the temple has known for a long time. Dean thought. Whoosh! The 3 of them sneaked through the wilderness and returned to the outer wall. The 3 of them came to the giant wall of the inner wall. Dean took Gwyneth and Glenn to climb the giant wall and return to the outer wall. There are people patrolling the giant wall and the high wall of the inner wall. In the next few days, you should explore their patrol pattern. Dean returned to the wilderness of the outer wall. He looked for the horse he had ridden before and said to both of them. Gwyneth and Glenn nodded. I will try to think of another way to help you sneak into the inner wall. These 2 routes are safer, Dean said as he rode the horse. If there were patrols on the giant wall during the day, then it would be too dangerous for both of them to pass the message to the inner wall. After all, they didn't hesitate to rely on ropes. Once the ropes were removed, they wouldn't be able to climb up again. He had already planned to make a small hot air balloon and a glider for them as soon as he returned to ensure their safety during the landing. It was early in the morning. The 3 of them had spent 4 or 5 hours going back and forth to the inner wall. It was curfew time when they returned to the outer wall. The sound of horses' hooves was particularly loud. Dean stopped at a courier station. Glenn understood. She jumped off the horse and kicked open the door. She picked up the frightened boss from his bed like a chicken and asked for a carriage. The 3 of them drove back to the castle. Glenn acted as the coachman and inserted another flag of the temple from her backpack into the carriage. Along the way, when they met patrolling soldiers, she simply said a few words and returned to the Tizar River unimpeded. Dean was sitting in the carriage thinking. Suddenly he felt 4 or 5 red lights flashing in front of him. He couldn't help but be startled. He looked up and his face changed. He saw that these red lights were hidden all over his castle, exuding scorching heat. In the direction of the castle hall, there were a few weak fireflies gathered together. All of them were in human shape. Ambush! The idea flashed in Dean's mind as he asked Glenn to stop the car. Glenn was puzzled. What's wrong? Dean was surprised as he looked at the castle. The people who were lurking there didn't emit any smell. Their bodies were much more exuberant than Glenn's. They were like the saint he met during the day. Most of the people who dared to ambush him in his castle were from the inner wall. Turn around and go to the knight's hall. Dean said, There's an ambush at home. Glenn and Gwyneth were surprised, but didn't doubt Dean's words. Both of them knew that Dean's strength was much higher than theirs. What a fast movement! Dean's heart was slightly cold. He thought that they would come tomorrow at the earliest. He didn't expect that they would come tonight. Fortunately, he had ordered everything. Otherwise, it would be too passive. Hiss! Suddenly, the horse that was pulling the carriage screamed loudly. The three people in the carriage were shocked. Bang! Bang! Dean pulled Gwyneth out of the carriage and fell on the ground 7 or 8 meters away. His pupils slightly shrank as he saw that the carriage he was sitting in was swept by a thick black whip. It was broken from the middle. At the same time, a red figure suddenly appeared in his wide field of vision. It was like a giant eagle swooping down towards Dean. Dean felt a murderous aura shrouding him. He pushed away Gwyneth, who was next to him, and quickly took out the dagger from his leg to attack the oncoming figure. Ding! A burst of sparks came out. Whoosh! The figure swung the black whip in his hand and danced towards Dean. Dean took out another dagger and quickly blocked it. The moment he touched it, he heard a hissing sound. He turned his head and couldn't help but be shocked. The black whip was actually a living snake. The snake opened its mouth and spat out a transparent venom. Dean was caught off guard, and the venom hit his left arm. He was shocked and angry. He quickly waved his right fist to block the venom. Whoosh! The snake's head quickly retracted and coiled around the arm of the previous person. The person also stopped and looked at Dean with interest. There was a bit of surprise in his eyes. Whoosh! 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 At the same time, from the castle in the distance, several figures quickly came over. Dean's face slightly changed as he deeply looked at the figure in front of him. He had bright golden hair and was wearing platinum armor. There were exquisite patterns on his shoulders. His face was reflected on the mirror on his chest. He was holding a black whip in his hand. The handle was the handle of the whip, but the body of the whip was slightly twisting. It was clearly a black snake. Dean took a deep breath. Monastery? The blonde youth faintly smiled. Yes, I'm the third captain of the monastery's saints, Francis. Are you the legendary master who injured one of our saints? Mr. Dean? Dean narrowed his eyes. Are you here to silence me? Chapter 446. Please. Dean coldly snorted as he saw several figures rushing out of the castle. He knew that it would be difficult to end today. The way you invite people from the inner wall is very special. Francis smiled. It's our style to use a special way to invite special people. Please cooperate with us, Mr. Dean. Dean replied. Don't forget that I'm a golden knight of the Knight's Hall. If you wanted to go back with you, then please show me the handwritten order. It's windy here. If you want to see the handwritten order, then go back to your castle. Francis chuckled. Mr. Dean shouldn't try to escape. You have been poisoned by my magic frost snake. If you don't have the antidote, then you will soon die. Dean narrowed his eyes. Although his eyes were still staring at Francis, he had seen the wound on his left hand. Through his X-ray vision, he could see a thin layer of ice crystal under the wound on his left shoulder. It was the transparent venom that was spat out by the snake whip. It didn't spread in the shoulder, but it was frozen into ice. At some point, it seemed that the disadvantages could be turned into advantages. Dean was grateful for his ice blood disease. I'll go with you. But the temple and the Knight's Hall must know about the forcible arrest of me. Otherwise, I will doubt your identity. Are you people from the inner wall, or are you the villains of the Dark Church? 09, small, say net. Francis seemed to have expected this. He smiled and made a pleased gesture. Dean followed them back to the castle. Glenn and Gwyneth were surrounded by the other saints as they returned to the castle. Dean saw a saint youth in platinum armor standing in the living room. He was wearing the same standard armor as Francis. There was a black scabbard on his back. His posture was straight, and his posture was straight. Sergei, Nicholas, Macon, and others were sitting on the sofa next to the saint. They were shocked when they saw Dean. Macon stood up. Dean, run. They are here to catch you. Bang. The saint in the living room swung his leg and kicked Macon's body. Macon flew out from the sofa and hit the wall. He coughed up blood and fainted on the spot. Dean could clearly see that 4 or 5 ribs on Mason's chest were broken. Obviously, this was the result of the saint's actions. Otherwise, Mason's body would have been cut into two parts by this kick. Even so, he still felt a surge of anger and murderous intent. He took a step forward, and the blood in his body surged as if it was burning. With a low roar, he shot out like a cannonball and punched the chest of the young holy disciple. The saint's face changed as he raised his hand to block. Whoosh! Dean's fist hit the saint's arm. It was the first time he used all of his strength since he got the magic marks from his splitter. With a loud bang, the fist hit the sleeve of his arm. The platinum sleeve suddenly dented and deformed. The young saint's face instantly changed. Just when he wanted to step back to reduce the force, there was already an intense pain coming from his arm. His body suddenly flew out and crashed into the stairs behind him. With a few clangs, the wooden stairs were smashed into pieces. He fell into a cloud of dust, his body covered in dust. He looked extremely embarrassed. "Stop!" Francis, who was walking from behind, scolded. Dean's eyes were full of killing intent. His mind was full of anger. He had the impulse to start a massacre, but his reason restrained his footsteps. He knew that if he killed all the saints, then he would face the full force of the monastery. He couldn't afford it at the moment, so he could only endure. Whoosh! A figure came out from behind Francis and helped the saint to stand up. There was a trace of blood on the corner of the saint's mouth. His neatly combed blonde hair was messy and stained with sawdust. His face was full of anger. He grabbed the hilt of his sword and wanted to counterattack. "Stop!" Francis shouted again. The young holy disciple looked at him, gritted his teeth, and let go. Dean looked at the saint and said to Glenn, "Let's go and see Macon." He could not move. Francis and the other saints had already surrounded him. A slight move in one part would cause a chain reaction. Yes. Glenn's figure flashed as she arrived in front of Macon. She touched his chest and said to Dean, "Several of his ribs are broken. Stabilize the injury first." Dean said. Glenn nodded. She took off the clothes and bandaged the unconscious Macon. Dean turned to Francis. "Is this the behavior of the saints? Injuring innocent civilians at will?" Francis took back his eyes from the saint's body. He frowned as he saw Dean's angry, questioning tone. "We are just being cautious. Not to mention that he took the initiative to meddle. You are now a suspect of colluding with the Dark Church. He reported to you. It's a crime of covering up. It's good that we didn't kill him on the spot." Dean angrily said, "Even if I'm a suspect, even if he is covering up for me, according to the law, he shouldn't be treated like this. Generally speaking, no." Francis indifferently smiled. "But as you said, he is just a civilian. He isn't a so-called noble. A small civilian dare to cover up a suspected criminal. It's good that we didn't kill him on the spot." Dean understood the meaning of his words. The strictness of the law depended on the identity of the target. This made him feel resentful in his heart. He had a feeling of returning to the time when he was ignorant and was taken to the castle by the two hunters to test his physique. At that time, he also hated this feeling of being in a damn situation. What about the handwritten order? Dean suppressed his anger and didn't continue the topic. "This is our identity medal." Francis smiled as he took out a medal and handed it to Dean. "This medal can prove our identity. As for the handwritten order, I'm sorry, but when we come to the outer wall, we only use verbal orders. There is no handwritten order." Dean's face sank. His eyes flashed as he took the medal that Francis was about to take back. He carefully looked at it from the front to the back. Francis and others were surprised for a moment as they saw Dean's action. They couldn't help but laugh. Francis laughed. "No need to look at it. It's absolutely real. It's more real than gold." Chapter 447. "Mr. Dean, it's so late at night. Where did you go?" Francis looked at Dean with interest. Dean indifferently replied, "Do I need to report to you about this?" Francis smiled. "I'm just curious. How did Mr. Dean sneak into the inner wall?" Dean was surprised. Sneak into the inner wall? He suddenly turned around and looked at Sergei and others on the sofa. Sergei secretly pointed to Crone, who was sitting alone on another sofa. Dean was startled. Crone's face turned pale as he saw Dean looking at him. "Dean, I'm sorry. I was forced to confess." Dean's blood was shivering. Sham's departure had disappointed him. But he never expected that crone, who he had brought out from the slums, would betray him. Moreover, at such a critical moment, Francis looked at Dean's trembling shoulders and glanced at Dean's clenched fists. Mr. Dean, to be honest, we were also shocked. We didn't dare to think about sneaking into the inner wall. I'm really curious as to what method you used to sneak in. Dean stared at Crone. Why? Crone's body trembled. Dean, don't get excited. Crone's body trembled. Dean, don't get too excited. I didn't mean it. If I don't speak, then they will kill me. You have seen that they don't care about us civilians. I don't want to die. I'm sorry. I really don't want to die. Everything will be gone if I die. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Dean had never felt so angry and disappointed. It was like the time when the girl's eyes pierced through his body in the prison. He thought that he wouldn't feel heartache after that incident, but he didn't expect that one day he would fall again. Moreover, he would fall into the hands of people who he didn't guard against. His hands trembled uncontrollably. He gritted his teeth and said, Crone, anyone can betray me, but you can't. You can't betray me. Crone turned his head and gritted his teeth. I don't want to die. I know you brought me out of the slums and let me live a good life. Let me experience the feeling of being respected. But I really don't want to die. I'm still so young. I'd rather continue to live in the orphanage than die so early. Dean's heart twitched. Are you so afraid of death? They didn't say anything but you. Why? Yes, I'm so afraid of death. Crone turned to look at Dean. Don't look at me like that. It's as if you're disappointed and sad about me. Ha ha. You did bring me out of the slums, but in your eyes, I was just a tool. You used me to do things for you. You used me to cover for you. You are very suspicious. You don't dare to use others, so you can only use me. Dean stared at him deeply. Do you know why I used you? Crone was startled. Why? Of course it was because of trust. After a moment of silence, Crone slowly said, You trust me because you know me. You know that I can't live without you. So you can trust me. Ha ha. In your eyes, I'm just a useless cripple. If I leave you, I won't be able to survive in the commercial district. So you can trust me without any worries. If you really treat me as your partner, then I'll be loyal to you. Although I'm afraid of death, but at least I'm willing to sacrifice myself for my friends. But you are not my friend. You are my master. Don't forget that I have to call you young master. I'm just a servant under your hands. You brought me and Barton to Old Feline to teach. You want us to help you in the future. Do you dare to say that you are not using us? You got so many magic marks. You gave them to others, but you didn't give me any rare magic marks. With your ability, if you want to get a rare magic mark, won't it be a piece of cake? You didn't really intend to cultivate me. The 3 people you brought are your best friends. But one of them is gone. You are so black-hearted, so vicious, so insidious and despicable. I have seen it all. You're not the Dean I knew in the orphanage. You are a worse person than all the bad people I have ever seen. You are a devil. When you have real trusted subordinates, you will abandon me sooner or later, just like how you treated your adoptive parents. You will place me in a random place and give me some money. I'm not even sure if you will treat me like that. Maybe you will treat me even worse. Dean listened to his words, and his heart was getting colder and colder. He suddenly felt that the whole world was playing a big joke on him. He took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. The disappointment and pain on his face had recovered. There was no expression on his face. He said, Are you done? Crone slightly gritted his teeth. I'm done. I know that I'm sorry for you. I'll go to the inner wall and worship you. Go to the inner wall? Dean was silent for a moment. I didn't give you rare magic marks because I didn't want you to get involved in the war. My intuition told me that magic marks are not a good thing. I don't need to give them to you. I won't let you participate in the war. Magic marks are useless to you. Crone's face turned gloomy. Do you think that I will believe? You don't have to believe me. Dean indifferently said, I'm just telling you my thoughts. It has nothing to do with me whether you believe me or not. As for the reason that you think that I treat my adoptive parents that way, there's a reason. They adopted a new child, and their family is very happy. My adoptive father Gray's dream is to live in the commercial district. I helped him to complete it. My adoptive mother Jura is a good person. I don't want her to be involved in my life. I don't want her to suffer like you are now. You are held hostage and unable to resist. You will die at any time. You say that I'm vicious and despicable. Yes, I treat my enemies like that. They put me in prison and I will pay them back 100 times, but when have I ever been vicious to you? Have I ever used your life to do things for me? Crone was startled. Sergei and Nicholas, who were sitting on the sofa, were silent. Gabriel slightly pursed his lips as he looked at Dean, who was surrounded by Francis and several saints. There was sadness in his eyes. Dean turned to Francis. When are we leaving? Francis looked at him. Don't be so anxious. I can guess one or two things even if you don't tell me. You are able to sneak into the inner wall through the transportation team of the Monster Research Institute. You are much more powerful than I thought. Dean indifferently said, I don't want to talk to you. Francis shrugged his shoulders. All right, you go and pack up your things. Bring your daily necessities and valuables with you. You might have to stay in the monastery for a period of time after going to the inner wall. Dean looked at him. He knew that most of the time he had searched the castle. Now he wanted him to take the initiative to bring some of his private things. He estimated that when the time comes, they would take it away. All right. Dean turned and went upstairs. The other saints didn't follow Dudian and allowed him to go upstairs. Dean didn't look for the super chip that was stored in the secret compartment. He took some of his clothes and his own animal hair toothbrush. He put them in his backpack and went downstairs. Francis winked to the left, and right as he saw him go downstairs, two saints jumped from the collapsed stairs to the second floor. They followed the smell of Dean and went back to the first floor. They shook their heads at Francis. Francis looked at Dudian. Mr. Dean is really incorruptible. Dean indifferently said, I only have one request. Don't hurt the others. They're just my servants. You can suspect me of colluding with the Dark Church or killing people. It has nothing to do with them. I hope that the monastery can be like the Holy Church and at least do a good job on the surface. Francis chuckled. Don't say that. It seems like we are bad. Dean was too lazy to answer. Let's go. Francis turned and waved. The two saints quickly left the hall and led the mounts from the river behind the castle over. They were 6 lions with snow-white fur all over their bodies. They were nearly 2 meters tall and had a majestic physique. 2 snow-white fangs were exposed, scaring the horses in the manor into neighing nonstop. Please. Francis smiled. The 4 saints jumped on the back of a snow lion. Dean also walked toward his snow lion. When the snow lion saw Dean approaching, it growled and opened its bloody mouth, revealing its fangs and mouth. If it moved forward, it could directly swallow Dean, but it was obviously just roaring to intimidate him. Dean was in a bad mood. His eyes flashed coldly as he saw the beast roar. He also roared. The snow lion saw the green in Dean's eyes. Its roar turned into a low whine as it drooped its head. Dean coldly snorted, pressed its head, turned over, and jumped on its back to sit down. The saints were surprised. The snow lion was a beast of light cultivated by the monastery. It had an unruly nature. Even the saints had to spend months or even years to become partners with it. They didn't expect that Dean would tame it with just a roar. Francis's eyes lit up as he walked to the front of the snow lion. He took out a pill. This is the antidote to curb the spread of the poison. Although it can't detoxify you, but it will allow you to reach the inner wall. Dean looked at it and smelled it. He put it into his mouth, but didn't swallow it. Instead, he hid it outside his teeth. After all, the venom on the snake whip had frozen in his shoulder and lost its effect. If this one was also poison, then there was no way to save him. Elder! Elder! At this moment, Crone rushed out of the hall. Francis turned around and said, What is it? What else do you want to say? Crone replied, Elder, didn't you promise me that you would take me to the inner wall? If I stay here, they will definitely kill me. Francis shook his head as he saw that Crone didn't have any news to say. He jumped on the back of his snow lion. I'm sorry, but not everyone can enter the inner wall, especially a disabled person like you. Crone was stunned. The next moment, his body trembled with anger. His face turned red as he said, You don't keep your word. Aren't you from the monastery? Aren't you from the Holy Church? How? How can you break your word? Chapter 448. You. Crone's eyes were red and his body was trembling. He clenched his fists and teeth as he thought of something. It was as if he was grasping the last straw. Elder, it will inevitably damage the reputation of the Holy Church and the monastery if you do this. Even if I'm killed, but there are other people here who will spread the news. Sergei, Nicholas, and the others who had rushed into the hall were shocked. They clenched their fists as they looked at him angrily. Dean, who was sitting on the back of another snow lion, suddenly shot out a cold light from his indifferent and ruthless eyes. Francis deliberately tilted his head. That's reasonable. He turned to Dean. What do you think? Dean's eyes slowly moved away from Crone. He stared at Francis' eyes. I advise you not to do such a stupid thing. Francis squinted his eyes and suddenly smiled. I think so too. We are saints, not devils. If it's not necessary, we don't want to kill people. Moreover, they will only be charged with the crime of covering up. The magistrate will deal with it. Crone said in a hurry, Elder, take me with you. If you think I'm a burden, then you can leave me in a small town in the inner wall. I beg you. Small town? Francis sneered. He stroked the fur of his snow lion and said, You'll have to ask my baby whether it's willing to let you sit on it or not. Crone was startled. His expression turned ugly, but he still squeezed out a smile and said carefully to the ferocious-looking snow lion, Can I sit on your back? Roar. The snow lion that Francis was sitting on growled at him. Crone's heart was beating fast. He was so scared that he took 2 steps back. His face was pale, and he nervously raised his head to look at Francis on the back of the snow lion. He said in a trembling voice, Sir, did it agree? Francis laughed and said, What do you think? The other man laughed. It told you to get out of here. This is a light beast. Do you think you're worthy to sit on it? His words immediately drew laughter from the others. Crone's face turned pale as he hurriedly begged. Your Excellency, I beg you. How about I ride a horse with you? You promised me. You must keep your word. Otherwise, if the news spreads out, it will have a bad influence on you. Do you think I care? Francis smiled. Moreover, how can a horse keep up with us? But Crone was about to continue to plead, but Francis lifted the reins. Snow Lion shook its head and turned away. Its tail swept in front of Crone. Crone was so scared that he stopped in his tracks. After Francis and the others had gone 7 or 8 meters away, Crone reacted and hurriedly chased after them. My lord, please. After chasing for more than 20 meters, Francis and the others had already run hundreds of meters away and gradually disappeared into the night. Whoosh, whoosh. 6 snow lions left the Tyza River and ran along the streets of the aristocracy. They took a detour to the commercial suburbs. This way they could avoid the curfew soldiers and delay their time. After arriving at the suburbs, Francis took the lead and led the way. The other 4 people sandwiched Dean in the middle, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. The snow lion looked sturdy, but its speed was incomparably fast. It could walk on any terrain as if it was flat ground. Occasionally, it would encounter some steep hills and swamps, but it could also easily leap over them. Unless it encountered an extremely dangerous terrain, it could maintain a straight line forward, which greatly increased the speed of marching. Everyone was silent. Dean, Francis, and others came to the high wall of the inner wall after an hour or so. Francis led the way and ran parallel to the high wall. After a moment, they came to a door arched inside the high wall. There was a saint riding a snow lion waiting for them. His hands were wrapped in gauze. It was the blonde saint that Dean saw during the day. The blonde saint's face sank as he saw Dean. He subconsciously raised his hand to block his bandaged arm. He didn't want Dean to see his injury during the day. Open the door, Francis whispered. The blonde youth nodded slightly. He raised his fist and pounded on the door, producing a series of sounds of varying intensity. After a while, the door slowly opened. There were 2 people wearing standard armor behind the door. Their bodies exuded an amazing heat which wasn't inferior to the saints present. Dean recognized them at first glance. They were wearing the same uniform as the patrols on the top of the wall. Apparently, they came from the same force. Francis was the first to enter. After the group of people came in, the two young men in standard armor closed the wooden door together and twisted the stone valve on the side. With a rumbling sound, a heavy stone door slowly descended from the groove in the wall behind the wooden door, blocking the passage. "Thank you very much." Francis thanked the two young men in uniform. He patted the snow lion and said, "Let's go." Then he took the lead. Everyone maintained their previous formation and followed closely behind. The blonde saint whose arm was injured was at the end of the line. He blocked the only gap in the passage. Dean's face was calm as he saw that they were on alert. He didn't plan to escape halfway. He didn't make any big mistakes and didn't offend any big shots. There was no need for the inner wall to put him in a dead end. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, then there would be a chance to make a comeback. After all, the Knights' Hall had promised to keep him safe. If he ran away now, then he would be accused of crime. Then he would have to hide in the dark of the outer wall. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to escape death. If he lurked in the dark, then the development would be too slow. Once he was betrayed, then he would be beyond redemption. Moreover, after the betrayal of Crone, he realized that the only person he could trust was himself. In addition, the emotional trust of others was far more reliable than the benefits and deterrence. Although the benefits and deterrence weren't as reliable as emotional factors, but the possibility of rebellion would be higher if someone gave them higher benefits and deterrence. Although emotions were unstable, but sometimes they could be indestructible. Dean's thoughts drifted away as he thought of this. He felt that he was very weak. He had a lot to learn compared to the nobles, warlords, rulers, and others. It wasn't just about the knowledge and strength of the nobles. It was about being a person. Hunters were strong, but they were ordered by the nobles who didn't have the strength to truss a chicken. No matter how brave he would ultimately be fighting alone, a general without an army. In the jungle world, the law of the jungle is the law of the jungle. If you want to be the king of the beasts, then you have to be more fierce than the other beasts. You have to play the characteristics of the beast to the extreme. But this is the human society after all. Your own strength is only a guarantee of your own safety. The ancients said that it is easy to conquer the country, but difficult to defend it. You have to rely on force to make people convinced. You can't bite half an inch of the country, even if you grind your teeth. But when it comes to defending, suppressing people's mouths with brute force alone is like guarding a river. If this goes on for a long time, it will inevitably lead to an even more violent counterattack. Brute force is only a deterrent. Only a glib tongue can convince people and make them obey. If you want to be the ruler of all people, then you have to understand the people. You have to know how to be a person better than everyone else. Kind mouth, but ruthless heart. Crone betrayed me today. He thought that I was despicable and evil. I told him all my plans in front of him without reservation. He didn't consider what the bystanders would think of me when they heard my vicious plans. So he was afraid of me and thought that I had no bottom line. He thought that I would treat him the same way in the future. This is my failure and a lesson for me. Fortunately, this lesson isn't too heavy. Dean was jolting along with the snow lion while reflecting on today's events and the feelings in his heart. "Mr. Dean, what are you thinking about?" At this time, Francis turned his head and smiled at Dean. Dean's thoughts shrank as his eyes regained focus. He looked around the wilderness. "Nothing. I'm just wondering why we are still in the wilderness after running for so long." Francis smiled. The people from the outer wall ask the same question when they come here for the first time. You will know the answer in the future if you have a future. Dean indifferently said, "Are you trying to provoke me to run away?" "I'm not guilty, so why would I be afraid of you? Guilty or not, it's not up to you to say." Francis laughed. Dean wrinkled his brows, but remained silent. The team continued to be silent for more than 3 hours. Francis said, "We are almost there. Let's hurry up so that we can go back and rest." "Great. Poor cat. I didn't feed it at night. It's probably starving," a female saint on the left said in a sad tone. Francis smiled and said, "This is the last bit of the journey. Let's keep our spirits up." Chapter 449. It didn't take long for Dean to see a towering stone fortress standing at the end of the official road. The fortress was about 50 meters high. The outer wall of the fortress was like the back of a hedgehog, full of sharp stone thorns. Some of the stone thorns were stained with dried blood, and the dried corpses of the monsters were hanging on it. The scope of the fortress seems to be very long, Dudian said. Francis laughed. It's not very long. The fortress encircles the entire central area. It's the first line of defense. The actual length is as long as one side of the giant wall. Dudian frowned. There are many masters in the inner wall. Why do we need the fortress to defend against the beasts in the wilderness? Francis shrugged. It's always safer to live inside the wall than outside the wall. But the view is blocked inside the wall. How can we see the vast scenery outside the wall? Francis laughed. This is just a piece of wild grass. There is no scenery to speak of. Let's not see it. Dudian indifferently said, What you see is desolation. I see freedom. Francis shrugged and rode the snow lion to the front of the stone wall fortress. The soldiers stationed at the gate opened the gate of the fortress when they saw Francis's outfit and mount, and they respectfully welcomed him on both sides. The group of people entered the stone wall fortress. There were several barracks and villages in the suburbs. Dudian said, I didn't expect that there would be such a desolate village in the central area. Francis smiled. Mr. Dean, we don't have the concept of village in the inner wall. The people who live here are the wives and children of the soldiers who were stationed in the fortress. The soldiers couldn't go home for a long time, so they moved their wives and children to live near the fortress. Their wives and children can work here and take care of each other. Dudian's eyes lit up but didn't speak. The group sped along the main road and left the vicinity of the fortress in the blink of an eye. They ran along the main road through the rolling mountains. After more than half an hour, they arrived in front of a towering mountain. They saw the outline of a town on the hillside and at the foot of the mountain. They could faintly hear the bustling sounds of people. This is the Mount St. Paul branch of our abbey. Mr. Dean, we're almost there, Francis said loudly in the front. Dean silently observed. A town stood against the mountains. The buildings were scattered and the scenery was beautiful. Francis didn't take Dean into the town. Instead, they walked along the mountain road to the top of the mountain. They passed through a stone gate. Two young men, wearing standard armor, were standing guard at the gate. Seeing Francis and the others, the two immediately bowed respectfully and said, Greetings, Lord Saint. Francis nodded slightly. After entering the mountain gate, they continued to go up the mountain path. After a while, he brought Dean to a vast square on the top of the mountain. He jumped off the back of the snow lion and walked into the square. The same was true for the other 5 saints. Dean also got off the snow lion and followed behind. At the end of the snow-white square was a magnificent monastery building. The style was similar to that of a Western monastery. It was completely different from the simple and unadorned Buddhist monasteries. In front of the monastery were 2 statues of angels. This is our main monastery. There's also a small monastery and a reserved monastery on the mountainside. Francis introduced to Dean with a smile. Dudian was surprised. The monastery institution originated from Christianity. It was roughly divided into a small monastery, and a big monastery. He didn't expect that the same setting would be used here. Could it be that the monastery was passed down from the old era? Otherwise, why were the names exactly the same as the old era? When Francis came to the top of the steps, the dawn light fell on the entrance of the hall. It could be seen that the location of the construction of a monastery was extremely exquisite. Come with me. Francis took Dean to enter through the side door. The light inside was dim. There was a long passage behind the side door. After walking for more than 10 meters, there were several forks. Francis picked a path and walked down it. The further he walked, the darker the light became. On both sides, there were still long corridors that looked like secret tunnels. After walking for a few minutes, he came across a few more crossroads. He picked one of them and continued walking. It didn't take long for a spiral staircase to appear in front of the secret corridor. It was still a maze of secret corridors. Is the interior of your monastery like this? Dean asked. He didn't directly ask where this place was. He didn't want Francis to be too lazy to tell him. Francis indifferently smiled. The great monastery contains the universe. How can you imagine it? It's a blasphemy against the gods if you enter the main hall of the great monastery with your identity. Now I'm going to take you to the interrogation room. Oh, there's another name for the interrogation room. It's called Shura Hell. Have a good taste of it. Dean frowned. They continued to walk down the secret corridor. After 7 or 8 spiral staircases, Dean felt that he was hundreds of meters below the square. He continued to walk for a while. Suddenly, he heard faint voices coming from the front of the secret corridor. The voices became clearer as they got closer. It turned out to be a series of screams. They came to the bottom of the secret corridor. Clear screams came from outside. Francis turned the mechanism and the iron door fell down. There was a prison torture room inside, but it was much bigger than the average prison torture room. There were all kinds of torture tools hanging on the wall. There were hooks, iron brushes, hammers, whips, and so on. There were also some human skin attached to the hair. There were 7 or 8 glass jars on the counter. There were human heads, tongues, hearts, and other organs soaked in them. Anyone who came to such a place would be scared to the point that their legs would go soft. The surrounding furnishings and the sputtering blood on the wall would remind people of the atrocities that had happened here. Dean frowned as he looked at the room. Francis looked back at Dean. He saw that Dean's expression was calm. He chuckled. Mr. Dean seems to have seen great winds and waves. Dean indifferently said, I advise you not to torture me without conclusive evidence. I thought you weren't afraid. Francis laughed. Dean indifferently looked at him. I just don't want to be touched by idiots. Francis chuckled and shrugged. I hope you can keep this attitude. By the way, I'm not the one interrogating you. It's the elder of the Justice Department of the Abbey of Mount St. Paul. Francis said to a strong man who was beating the prisoner, Come here and open the door. The muscular man was fat and had a round belly. He took off his shirt, revealing his white fat. He wore a black plastic mask and looked like a butcher in the market. He turned around and took a bunch of keys from a shelf and opened an iron door. The iron door was dirty and stained with blood and dust. No wonder Francis asked him to open the door. Dean looked at the prisoner who was being beaten. The latter's hair was disheveled. There were burns and whip marks on his body. Only half of his fingers and toes were left. It was obvious that he had suffered inhuman torture. The door opened and there was a passage inside. Francis led Dean into the passage. They walked for a while and came to several forks. One of the passages was much wider than the others. The oil lamps on the wall were brand new. The damp ground was covered with a layer of carpet. There was a thick wooden door in the middle of the passage. It was painted with scarlet paint. It was a bit cold. Francis knocked on the door. Francis requests to see you. After a moment, an old voice echoed from the room. Come in. Francis pushed the door open and saw the scene inside. He immediately stopped the door before it was fully opened. He turned around and said to the 5 saints behind him, You guys go back first. Wait for me outside. The 5 saints were startled, but didn't doubt his order. They nodded and went back. Dean's X-ray vision had already seen that there were 2 human silhouettes in the room. A realistic picture emerged in his mind, but it wasn't a good picture. However, he was surprised to see Francis's action. He looked at the back of the saint's captain and followed in. Elder. Francis respectfully bowed as he entered the room. Dean saw the scene inside the room. The floor was covered with a soft carpet. The room was extremely spacious and decorated with many works of art. There were some white skeletons in the middle of these works of art. At the moment, there was a big bed in the room. An old man in his 70s was leaning on the bedside. He was holding a voluptuous and graceful figure in his arms. Dean's face slightly changed. Is this the elder of the monastery's punishment department? Is this the genius Dean? The old man on the bed stretched out his hand and took the glasses from the woman who was acting like a spoiled kitten in his arms. He put them on and looked at Dean. Francis respectfully lowered his head and looked straight at his toes. He answered in a respectful tone, yes. Dean was also looking at the old man. He felt a sense of majesty as his eyes collided with the old man's. Although the old man was lying on the bed, his eyes were extremely deep, like a bottomless quagmire. It was as if a giant was overlooking him and could see through all the secrets in his heart. Chapter 450. Greetings, Elder. Dudian nodded in greeting. The old man quietly looked at him, his eyes revealing a sense of judgment. After a moment, he smiled and said, I heard that you injured a saint of our mystic sect. Your strength isn't bad, is it? Dudian knew that he would be pursued. It was a misunderstanding. I thought that the saint was an assassin from the Dark Church, so I tried my best to resist. I didn't expect to injure him. I didn't think that he was a saint of the monastery. I hope he could forgive me. A forgive me isn't enough to show sincerity. The old man whispered. Dudian wrinkled his brows. Elder, please instruct me. He bowed. The old man smiled. Mr. Dean should have seen the situation outside when you came here, right? Dudian replied, Yes. The old man looked at Dean's expression. He saw that Dean only spat out 2 words and didn't say anything else. He couldn't help but smile. Mr. Dean's bones are very hard. I don't know if he can maintain such a backbone after experiencing our life here. Dudian's face sank. Lord Elder, torture can only make me confess. I am not guilty. If you have evidence, I will not say anything. If you do not have evidence, but you insist on framing me or listening to others' slander, even if I beg you, will you believe me? Francis turned around and scolded. Watch your words. Watch your words. The old man waved his hand and chuckled. You're still young, but you're quite knowledgeable. Since you're a smart person, I hope you'll do something smart people do. To be honest, we called you here to invite you to join our monastery. Dudian was startled. Join the monastery? The old man smiled, yes. The holy church in the outer wall was established by the missionaries of our monastery. The nominal pope of the holy church is a great preacher of our monastery. You are an outstanding architect cultivated by the holy church. We have reviewed your resume, and you are qualified to join our monastery. Are you willing? Dudian was confused. All of this was a complete reversal. It was completely unexpected. Lord Elder. Dudian was startled. Didn't you say that I colluded with the devil? Why do you want me to join the monastery? The old man smiled. I know. Normally we would send an invitation letter to the holy church and the temple so that all the forces in the outer wall know about it. But your situation is a bit special, so we can only use this special method. Special? Yes. The old man slowly said. You just mentioned the Dark Church. Do you know the origin of the Dark Church? Dudian didn't expect the old man to suddenly go around to this topic. He hesitated. I don't know. What does elder mean? The Dark Church didn't exist at that time more than 200 years ago. The old man slowly said. The first preacher of our monastery was a legendary figure. He was appointed to the outer wall to preach to the ignorant people. He established the holy church. Since then, the people had faith, but the good times didn't last long. The preacher's ability was weak. The holy church gained the people's faith, but at the same time it gained the right to dominate the people. There were people in the holy church who coveted this right and wanted to seize it. So there was internal strife in the holy church. It split into several factions. After a period of fighting, it finally turned into 2 forces. Today's holy church and the dark church. Dudian was startled. Although he felt that the water of the dark church was deep, but he didn't think that the dark church was split from the holy church. No one of the name was so different. The old man continued. The elders and preachers of the monastery were furious when they got the news. So they sent the saints to the outer wall to help the holy church to destroy the dark church. However, this matter was later learned by Aristotle too. He ordered to preserve the dark church and transform it into a branch of the holy church of light. Dudian was shocked. The dark church is a branch of the holy church. Yes. The old man nodded. It is still the same. You should know that there must be darkness in the world if there is light. People won't know how to cherish the light if there is no darkness. Dudian was speechless. The old man looked at him. If you join the monastery, then you will become one of the deacons of the Dark Parliament. Your first appointment will be to go to the outer wall as an elder of the Dark Church. You will maintain the order of the Dark Church. At the same time, you will cooperate with the Pope to eradicate some uncontrolled extremists. Dudian felt like he was in a dream. It was too dramatic. He had come to the inner wall with the intention of cutting off all means of retreat. But he didn't expect that there would be light at the end of the tunnel. Although, according to the elder's words, it could only be regarded as light at the end of the tunnel. In this short moment of absent-mindedness, many mysteries hidden in the bottom of his heart were suddenly explained. No wonder, when he sneaked into the small town of the Dark Church where Nightingale was, the small town was full of people of the Dark Church, but the Light Church didn't come to encircle him. The forces of the Holy Church were spread in all directions. The whole town was a branch of the Dark Church. It was impossible that no one would go and inform on them. He had heard from Nightingale that there were nobles in the town, but now it was obvious that the real big shot behind the town was the Holy Church. It was no wonder that the Dark Church didn't exist in the 5 major forces of the inner wall. Even the ordinary people in the outer wall knew about the horror of the Dark Church. After all, the Dark Church was able to survive for many years under the siege of the Holy Church, especially the alchemists and potion masters of the Dark Church. But Gwyneth was a disciplinary elder, so it was impossible for her to not know about the Dark Church's influence in the inner wall. If you want me to join, you just need to tell me. Why do you have to arrest me in the name of colluding with the devil? If I desperately resist, isn't it? Dean looked at him bitterly. The old man faintly smiled. You won't have room to resist in front of us. Dujian's mouth slightly twitched, but he was silent. At the same time, he was secretly relieved. It seemed that his life wasn't in danger. Although he was shocked by the inside of the monastery, but at least he got a chance to develop. Sooner or later, he would be able to dominate his own life. Chapter 451. Moreover, it will be convenient for you to be arrested for colluding with the devil in the future. The old man slowly said, You will completely lose your identity once you become an elder of the Dark Church. You will have to live in the underground world. There are only 2 outcomes if your identity is exposed. First, you will be transferred to the inner wall, and the monastery will give you another job. Second, you will be handed over to the Holy Church, and they will punish you with capital punishment. At present, there are no vacant positions in the monastery. So if you're exposed, then there's only the second option for you. Dean felt a chill in his heart as he looked at the faint smile on the old man's face. He realized that he had no choice and was powerless to resist. The monastery had labeled him as colluding with the devil. If he didn't agree to join the monastery and serve as an elder of the Dark Church, then he would most likely be obliterated. If he agreed, then he would really become a member of the Dark Church. Even if he didn't hesitate to use his life to expose the sinister intentions of the monastery and the dirty side of the Holy Church. But the Dark Church would think that they were deliberately slandering the monastery and the Holy Church. In addition, once he agreed, he would be considered to have entered the system and would be at the mercy of others. Once he lost his value, he would most likely be arrested by the Radiant Church in the blink of an eye and be publicly executed, thus embellishing the sanctity of the Radiant Church. Dean took a deep breath. What if I don't agree? The old man narrowed his eyes and said with a faint smile, If you don't agree, this is your home. Dudian smiled. So, I have no choice. Are you deliberately testing me? The old man smiled. Our punishment is enough to make the dead speak. I don't need to talk to you. Dean knew that the old man wasn't joking, but he still had to ask. The first reason was to be cautious. The second reason was that he couldn't show that he was thinking too deeply. Sometimes pretending to be simple was a kind of self-protection. He asked, Elder, why did you choose me to do such a thing? There are so many masters in the shrine. If I'm not up to the task, and you keep me here, wouldn't you be letting the shrine lose a master with great potential? The old man laughed. You really don't know how to be modest. Dean's face reddened, revealing a bashful look. The old man took a deep look at him, as if he could see the depths of his heart. He smiled and said, Most of the time, the answer is hidden in the question. The reason why we chose you is very simple. Although there are many masters in the Divine Hall, they are old and have been influenced by the Holy Church for too long. I'm afraid that they will not be able to accept the truth for a while. Even if they accept under intimidation, but they are too old. It won't be easy to adapt to the sudden change of identity. But you are different. You are still young, and we have seen in your resume that you had a secret relationship with a noble lady. But the adults interfered and you were imprisoned. You relied on your own hands to escape from the most secure prison in the outer wall. This kind of technical work can reflect a person's ability in all aspects. Whether it is camouflage, observation, or forbearance, you're the best choice. Moreover, before you were 8 years old, you were in the slums, in the orphanage. Although you only stayed in the orphanage for a few months, and your resume can't be found, but most of the time you were abandoned by the poor. Therefore, you are born with hostility. This isn't something that the Holy Church can change overnight. For a person like you who doesn't believe in God, becoming an elder of the Dark Church is the most suitable candidate. I suspect that you would have entered the Dark Church if you had any other choice. After all, that is the most suitable place for you. Dean's face slightly changed. He clenched his fists as cold sweat overflowed. But he was relieved. Indeed, it was very easy for the monastery to find out his resume. They could easily figure out a person's mind from his growth experience. He felt that some aspects of his actions were inappropriate. Although he didn't believe in God, but he didn't pretend to believe in God. He did not actively participate in some of the public welfare activities of the Holy Church. Although he had the merit of repelling the barbarians, it was easy to see the interest behind this matter when looking at it from a higher perspective. And the beneficiary of this interest was himself. Although the merit of repelling the barbarians could confuse the ordinary people, but it was difficult to confuse the big shots who lived in the inner wall. The old man saw that Dean was silent, so he smiled. "Mr. Dean, you have said so much. It's time to announce your answer." Dean looked at him and sighed. "It seems that I have no choice. Since you have agreed, then I hope that you can fulfill your duties. Don't let us down." The old man smiled. Dean nodded. "I will try my best to adapt. But what do I need to do as an elder of the Dark Church? Do I need to hand over the intelligence of the extremists of the Dark Church to the Holy Church?" The old man smiled and said, "This is only one of them. Moreover, there is no need for you to personally do this kind of thing. You only need to manage the things that are within your authority and kick out those who do not follow the rules." Dean asked, "In addition to me, were the other elders appointed by you? Some are, and some are not." The old man whispered, "You have no right to know the identity of other people. You just have to do your own things. But I advise you to keep your identity a secret. Some of the elders are the real elders of the Dark Church. If they know that you are sent by the monastery, then your life will be in danger." Dean was slightly startled. He said with a wry smile, "So, am I fighting alone?" The old man smiled. "Your truest ally is the Radiant Church." Dean wryly smiled. "You can also continue your research. The Dark Church has the Alchemy Tower and the Alchemist College. You can study there." The old man smiled, "But don't make too much noise, especially the Dark Church's taboo alchemy. You'd better not touch it. If you manage to create a taboo alchemy one day, I hope you will forget it. Otherwise," Dean understood the meaning of the old man's words. "I don't have any background. Wouldn't it arouse the suspicions of the other elders if I directly appoint them as elders?" The old man indifferently said, "Don't worry. Every elder is directly appointed by the Pope of the Dark Church. No one knows the identity of the other elders. Everyone will have a new identity after becoming an elder. Unless they take the initiative to expose their identity, no one else will know. This is the rule, and it is also convenient for the monastery to handle matters." Dean was relieved. "Isn't the identity of all the elders clear to the Pope?" "Yes." "Then why not get rid of the other elders and arrange them as our own people?" The old man indifferently smiled. "You think too simply. Every elder is involved with alchemist families and other forces. If we appoint all of them as our own people, then there will only be two results in the long run. One is that the Dark Church will gradually turn white, and the other is that all the elders we send will turn black." Dean was startled as he heard the old man's words. but he knew that the old man wasn't telling the truth. The biggest drawback of arranging them as the monastery's people was that the monastery would unite and rebel. The monastery didn't want to see this. Although they weren't afraid of the rebellion of the Dark Church, as the strength of the inner wall could completely suppress them. But the Holy Church and the outer wall would be passive, and the monastery's operations would be destroyed. Dean had guessed this concern when the old man said that he didn't have the right to know the identity of the other elders. But he couldn't say it or pretend to understand it. Elder, as far as I know, the Dark Church and the Holy Church have been in conflict for a long time. They have caused countless casualties. Many Knights of Light have fallen, and many amazing alchemists have been beheaded by the Holy Church. If these people didn't die, then wouldn't we be able to develop our divinity to a higher level? Dean asked in doubt. The old man narrowed his eyes. Do you know that your idea is very dangerous? Dangerous? Dean was at a loss. All of us masters think so. Isn't it wrong? Chapter 452. The old man smiled as he saw Dean's confused expression. After all, he was still a child. He said, Do you know why some inventions are classified as forbidden? Dean's heart skipped a beat, but he was still at a loss. Why? What do you think is the common point of these forbidden techniques? Common point. Dean thought for a moment. I remember that the flame explosion is a forbidden technique because of its destructive power. It is easy to cause great casualties and destruction if it is used improperly. There was a trace of speculation in his heart as he spoke. However, he didn't dare to show it on his face. The old man faintly smiled. Yes, the destructive power is the main reason why it is a forbidden technique. If the destructive power is too strong, then it could be used by people with bad intentions. It would be a great harm to the nobles and the inner wall. That's why it has to be banned. As for your steam gun, the wise men of the monastery have studied it. It's even more terrifying than the flame blast magic. Even if it's held by a child, it can easily kill a noble in the dark. How could the nobles allow such a weapon to run rampant in the outside world and spread around? Dean was silent. When he made the steam gun, he had already anticipated this possibility. After all, in the Middle Ages of the Old Era, the Western Middle Ages were destroyed by gunpowder. When gunpowder appeared, the knight's sword lost its effect and couldn't protect the authority of the nobles. But in here, the gunpowder was suppressed by the inner wall. Now, his steam rifle was also suppressed. Although he knew the result, he still took the risk to make the steam rifle. The main reason was that he wanted to take this opportunity to destroy the Melon Consortium in one fell swoop. Otherwise, it would take a long time for him to bring down the Melon Consortium. So this was a bet. The reason why he dared to bet that his steam rifle would at most be classified as a forbidden technique and would not threaten his life was because he knew that the Inferno family of the Dark Church had produced gunpowder. It could be seen that although the divine technique was banned, but the user wouldn't suffer much harm. The wisdom and life of us humans are bestowed by the God of Light. The old man slowly said, But if we don't restrain our wisdom, sooner or later it will lead to a disaster. The destructive power of your steam rifle is too great. When you become a member of the Dark Church in the future, your steam rifle will become an evil technique of the Dark Church. You are forbidden to study it. However, as the founder of the air element, you can continue to study, but you can't publish it. Just like the Inferno family of the Dark Church, any research related to the air element must go through an audit before it can be published. If it is a forbidden technique, then it will be banned. Dean was silent. He knew that he had no room to resist. However, the old man's words made him have a strange idea. Since the research was classified as a forbidden technique and couldn't be made public, then why was he allowed to research it? Was it because he was afraid that he had nothing better to do, so he gave him some freedom? Or would these forbidden arts be like the divine cannons of the military, ready to be pulled out when necessary? If that was the case, then when was the necessary moment? Was there a stronger enemy in the inner wall? Or was there a bigger threat? The old man looked at Dudian, who was silent. He didn't think that Dudian's imagination would run wild because of his words. He knew that Dudian was young and arrogant. Dudian was not convinced but didn't dare to speak out. The old man smiled. "From now on you are an elder of the Dark Church. I hope that you can handle matters of the Dark Church on behalf of the monastery. If you see something that you don't adapt to, then it is best to adapt on your own. Otherwise, no one will be able to save your life." Speaking of this, he paused for a moment before continuing with a smile. "But since you can survive in Thornflower Prison for 3 years, ordinary scenes shouldn't scare you." Dean knew that he was invisible in front of the old man, so he didn't bother to hide it. "Francis, take him to go through the formalities," the old man ordered. Francis respectfully nodded. "Yes, Elder." He turned to Dean. "Mr. Dean, let's go." Dean looked at Francis and the old man. "Elder, I have never been to the inner wall. Can I go around and go back?" The old man's eyebrows slightly raised. "No problem. It's not convenient to send you back during the day. Francis, take Deacon Dean around during the day. Remember not to delay the evening schedule." Francis respectfully replied, "Yes, just one day." Dean was a bit regretful, but he didn't have a right to speak, so it was useless to say more. He followed Francis out of the room. After the door closed, the old man and the woman listened to the footsteps outside gradually fade away. After a while, the voluptuous woman in the old man's arms gently smiled. Her fingers lightly played on the old man's chest as if she was playing a piano. She said, "This little guy is quite interesting." The old man was surprised. "What? Are you interested in him?" "The smell of his body is very delicious." The woman slightly licked her lips. The old man's eyes lit up. It's really rare for him to reach the saint level at such a young age in the barren outer wall. God's blessings are a huge amount. If you want to make a breakthrough from senior hunter, then you need a lot of magic marks. Moreover, there are requirements for the quality of the magic marks. The most important thing is that the blessings that the Monster Research Institute provides to the outer wall have no effect on enhancing the physique of a senior hunter. This little guy is hiding a lot. The woman gently moved closer to his face and said in an ambiguous tone, "Do you want me to empty him?" "You little demoness, he can't take it." The old man smiled. "Moreover, he is now the deacon of the monastery. He has to supervise the Dark Church and the Holy Church. It's good that he has some ability. Otherwise, we will have to look for candidates. Those stubborn old men can't do these things. Do you think I'm a deacon of the monastery? Is my position higher or lower than yours?" Dudian casually asked Francis as they walked through the passage. Francis smiled. "Why? The formalities haven't been done yet, and you want to control me?" Chapter 453. Francis shrugged his shoulders and said, "You can think of it that way, but you don't have a right to beat me up. We saints are a different system. We only follow the orders of the elders and the holy saint. Although you are a deacon of the monastery, you belong to the supervision department of the monastery. Your identity and mission cannot be exposed, and you don't have any real power. If you want to beat me, then you have to climb to the position of an elder or ask the elder to give you the authorization to command me." Dudian was surprised. Is the information blockade really in place? If another saint captain were to expose my identity, it would be a huge blow to the loyal saints of the mystic sect, wouldn't it? Francis laughed. "I don't know about the blow, but I know that you will be in danger once someone exposes you." Dean narrowed his eyes and shrugged. "Do you mean that I have to beg you to keep it a secret for me? I don't believe that you will be exempted from the responsibility if my identity is exposed." Francis laughed and said, "All right, we're even." Dudian didn't continue the topic. "Will there be anyone to pick me up when I descend to the Dark Church in the outer wall?" "Naturally, I will arrange it for you," Francis said as he walked. "The torture room is in front of us. The first procedure is to brand you. I will take care of the rest for you." "Brand?" Dudian's eyebrows twitched. At this time, they came to a spacious torture room. There were many instruments on the wall and blood spattered on the wall. "Greetings, Saint," two young jailers who were on duty at the door said, in a respectful manner. Francis nodded slightly. He took out a key from the wall and opened the heavy iron door. The light inside was dim. He pushed open the door and said to Dudian, "Please, Dean glanced at the interior of the building and then went in. This is a special place for criminals to be branded. However, the branding of criminals is just a cover. At the same time, it's also for people with special identities like you. Francis turned around and closed the door. Ordinary people can't come in here. But after you get out, you better keep a low profile. I will tell the others that your investigation is over, and you are temporarily cleared of suspicion. Dean didn't answer. He looked around. It was a dark corridor with tools of various shapes hanging on both sides. Francis said, "The first point of joining the Dark Church is to be branded with the badge of the Dark Church. You pick a pattern." Dean silently looked around. He knew what Francis was talking about. He had used the ink to disguise the dark mark, but now he would be branded with the real mark. It meant that the monastery and the Holy Church could easily push him out and burn him to death if he made any wrong moves. The weak cannot help themselves. Dean looked at it and pointed to a tool. This one. Francis took it off and asked, "Where is the tattoo?" "My back." Dean thought for a moment. He had used the ink to engrave on his chest because it could be washed off. But now the tattoo couldn't be washed off. He had to choose a hidden position. He had read from Roseyard's alchemy notes that some people engrave their dark mark on their armpits, buttocks, or even on the soles of their feet. In short, the more hidden the better. This way it wouldn't be easy for the Holy Church to detect it. However, he was appointed as an elder so he could talk with the Pope of Light. Unless the Pope of Light wanted to deal with him, the Holy Church wouldn't be able to find him. In that case, no matter how hidden the position was, he would eventually be found. Francis nodded and said, "All right, you can take off your clothes." Dean put the bundle in his hand aside and took off his coat. His young body was full of intricate scars like crisscross lines. Francis's pupils shrank, but soon recovered. He understood why Dean's face didn't change when he saw the brutal torture room. Even Francis, who had mastered tyrannical power when he was promoted to a saint, was scared to see such a scene for the first time. "Looks like you've been through a lot," Francis said in a low voice. Dean replied, "Not enough." At the same time, he was thinking in his heart, if he had suffered enough, he wouldn't be here today to be manipulated by you. Francis naturally didn't know what Dean was thinking. He would wait until Dean was ready to brand him. Half an hour later, Francis handed a glass mirror to Dean. "Look at it yourself." Dean felt the burning pain on his back, but his face remained calm. In fact, he saw the whole process of Francis branding him, including the dark mark of the inverted cross on his back. But he still reached out to take the mirror, turned his head, and pretended to look at it. Good craftsmanship. Hearing Dean's calm evaluation, Francis looked at him with interest. There was a little surprise in his heart. It was the first time for him to see such a precocious person. But seeing the scars on Dean's body, he knew that Dean was a patient teenager. He said, "It's not bad. I'm glad you don't mind." "I wouldn't dare." "You are welcome." Dean put on his clothes and carried the bag. "It's getting late and the sun is out. Let's go for a stroll." "All right." Francis moved his shoulders. "I didn't sleep last night. I'm quite tired." "Thank you. I don't dare to disobey the elder's instructions. Let's go." Both of them left the dark monastery's underground torture chamber and returned to the square. They saw the sun rising and its rays were shining on the earth. It dispelled the darkness and the cold and damp fog. In the square, the previous 5 saints were waiting on the steps, some sitting, some standing, and some leaning. Francis and Dean walked over. The 5 of them were surprised to see them. One of the saints couldn't help but ask, "Captain, why did he follow us out?" Francis smiled. "The elder has examined him and cleared the suspicion for the time being. He asked me to send him back tonight. Now, I'll take him down the mountain. You should be tired, so go back and rest." "Clear the suspicion?" The saint who asked the question was stunned. "Boring. It's a waste of time. Finally, I can go back and feed breakfast to my kitten. You guys chat. I'll withdraw first." One of the women in the team smiled and left. Another person beside him said, "I'll send you off." With that said, he followed behind. The other 3 laughed and said goodbye to Francis. Then they left together. Chapter 454. Francis and Dean went down the mountain after the warning was finished. This is the St. Paul mountain area. It's a bustling area of the inner wall. It's the sphere of influence of our monastery. Let's stroll around in the St. Paul mountain area. This place is enough for us to play for a day. Francis said. Dean asked, Are there any other areas besides here? Francis smiled. You could buy a map of the inner wall if you want to know more about it. I won't tell you in detail. Dean didn't ask any more questions. In the blink of an eye, they came to the foot of the mountain. Francis called a carriage with the monastery's flag. He took Dean to the carriage and told the coachman, Go to the city of Eden. The coachman agreed and rode away. Market? Dean was surprised. City of Eden? Francis smiled. It's the biggest city in the area under the jurisdiction of St. Paul. This city is bigger than the towns in the outer wall. The roads are perfect and all aspects are in good order. There are no towns in the inner wall. The preferential policies are the same as in the city. You will slowly understand if you have the opportunity in the future. Duddian nodded thoughtfully. He didn't expect that the management of the inner wall was similar to the old era. There is no concept of city in the outer wall. Francis saw that Dean didn't understand. He smiled but didn't say much. He leaned on the cushion and closed his eyes. Dean turned to him. Now that my mark is branded, you should give me the antidote, right? Francis opened one eye and said, I thought you didn't need it anymore. As he spoke, he reached into his pocket and took out a small white plastic bottle, from which he poured out a few dark red pills. Dean took a look at it and looked at Francis. Francis had closed his eyes again. He crossed his arms and leaned against the cushion. He thought for a moment and put the antidote into his mouth. He quietly put the antidote into his pocket and opened the curtain to enjoy the scenery along the way. There were green hills and lush trees. Birds were chirping and chirping. Shadows of buildings could be seen in the distance through the gaps between the trees. The environment was beautiful and the air was fresh. It was completely different from the outer wall area. Even the road under the carriage was carefully built with large stone bricks. Dean was used to the densely populated cities of the old era. There was a sense of comfort in his heart as he looked at the scenery of the trees and buildings. It would be a happy life if he could live in such a place. However, the faint scorching temperature of the brand on his back made his lazy and comfortable thoughts quickly turn into a sigh and disappear without a trace. The carriage traveled along the main road for an hour and came to a tall wall made of boulders. The wall was at the end of the road, and there were 3 words engraved on it: Eden City. There were soldiers standing guard below the high wall. The carriages coming from other roads slowed down one after another. When they passed the high wall checkpoint, they would take out gold coins and hand them to the soldiers at the gate before they were allowed to pass. Francis slowly opened his eyes as the carriage slowed down. He saw the scene through the curtain. This is the entrance fee. You need to pay the entrance fee to enter different cities. Today is the first time we meet, so I'll pay for you. Dean raised his eyebrows, but didn't say anything. The coachman paid the entrance fee and entered the road behind the high wall. After 10 minutes of driving, there was a lively sound of people. Go to the station, Francis said to the coachman. The coachman nodded and drove the carriage away. Dean looked through the curtain and saw the carriage enter the city. There were shops on both sides of the road. The road was very clean and tidy. It was paved with bricks. There was no gap. Perhaps this was an important entrance to the city. The business of the surrounding shops was extremely hot. Some shops were advertised with the words, Eden City Specialty, and the names of some rare fruits. Dean was startled. On the road, there was a tall woman wearing a black gauze hat and a noble dress. She was holding a rope in her hand as if she was walking a dog. However, the other end of the chain was tied to a strong man dressed in expensive clothing with neatly combed hair. At this moment, he was lying on the ground like a dog, walking on all fours and breathing with his tongue out, imitating a dog to perfection. Dean was stunned for a moment. The carriage passed by the man, but soon he saw other people dressed like nobles. They were also holding a man or a woman's chain. The scene made him a little dazed. There are many kinds of slaves. Some are maids, some are kitchen slaves, and some are dog slaves. Don't underestimate these dog slaves. Most of them have taken the blessing potion and are very strong. Right. I'll take you to see the beast slave market. Aristocrats often compete with their own dog slaves. It's very interesting. Francis noticed Dudian's expression and looked at the direction of Dudian's eyes. He indifferently smiled. These people are the children of aristocratic families. They are leading their own slaves. There are many kinds of slaves. Some are maids, some are kitchen slaves. But they are leading dog slaves. Don't underestimate these dog slaves. Dean was startled. Slaves shouldn't be used like this? At least they shouldn't be humiliated like this. Isn't it a violation of the etiquette of the aristocracy? Francis looked at him strangely. He patted his head. I forgot that your outer wall isn't like this. Well, how do I say it? Slaves don't have human rights. In your outer wall, slaves only need to do some hard work. But that's the concept created by the Holy Church. In our inner wall, the aristocracy has the final say. As for the violation of etiquette, I don't know about it. Anyway, this custom has been passed down from a long time ago. It's nothing strange. Dean's face slightly changed as he turned to look out of the carriage. From time to time, he could see some aristocratic people holding a bracelet. The other end of the bracelet was tied to a man or a woman. They were squatting on the ground, wearing very bright clothes. Even their hair was carefully trimmed. The passers-by turned a blind eye to this scene. It seemed that they had long been accustomed to it. They didn't maintain the slightest peace, as if it was supposed to be like this. He had a ridiculous feeling. Was this the inner wall that everyone yearned for? In his mind, the inner wall was prosperous. The nobles were more elegant than the outer wall. The civilians were relatively fair and relaxed. The civil invention was widely popularized, and the system was more perfect than the outer wall. But after coming here, he felt that there was a great difference from what he had imagined. Most of the soil outside was barren. Secondly, the population was only half of the outer wall. The scene in front of him was even more incredible. In his opinion, even if they were to treat slaves, they should at least cover it up. After all, such behavior was too brainless. However, according to Francis, the people here obviously didn't have the concept of human rights. Perhaps there was, but the object was not on the slaves. Dean realized that all nobles and civilians yearned for the inner wall. It wasn't a paradise, but a hell. At least it was a hell for the weak. The carriage stopped in front of the station. Francis got off and looked at Dean. I'll take you around. You could buy anything you like, but you have to pay for it. I know you have money, so I'll send you to the outer wall. I'll pay for it first. Dudian nodded. Francis took Dean along the street. I'll take you to the beast slave market to play. Let's see who has better luck. How about it? Dean nodded and didn't refuse. Francis smiled. His eyes were filled with excitement. He was looking forward to it. His steps were brisk as he walked in front of the group. Dean looked at the shops along the way. Most of them had exquisite jewelry and swords, but the scabbards and hilts were inlaid with diamonds and crystals. They were extremely luxurious. They didn't look like weapons for combat. Dudian felt a completely different atmosphere as he walked. The atmosphere here was dozens of times stronger than the commercial district of the outer wall. All the shops he saw were selling luxury goods that nobles loved. He heard some of the nobles talking and laughing along the way. Occasionally, they would say one or two words, but it was enough to make him think of a lot of chilling pictures. Francis? Suddenly, a person in front of them called out in surprise. Dean and Francis looked over and saw a handsome blonde-haired young man waving at them. Francis was startled for a moment. Then he laughed and said, "It's you, kid. Why do you have time to play here today?" "Of course I have to come out and have fun." The blonde youth squeezed through the crowd and noticed Dudian, who was next to Francis. He glanced at Dudian's black hair and frowned. "Who is this? Did you buy a new servant? Good temperament." Francis laughed. "Don't talk nonsense. He has just been promoted from the outer wall. He is a deacon of the supervision department. Mr. Dean, I brought him for a stroll." "Outer wall?" The blonde youth was surprised as he looked up and down at Dudian. He looked at Francis. "Let's not talk about this. There will be a show in Red Square today. Let's go and have a look. It would be great if we can grab one or two places." Dudian was ready to shake hands with Francis, but he didn't expect that Francis would turn a blind eye to him. Moreover, there was obvious contempt and disgust in Francis's eyes. It was obvious that Francis's eyes were related to Dudien's hair color and origin. Dudien didn't expect that Francis would reveal such thoughts without concealment. It was a loss of grace and subtlety. Of course, perhaps the other didn't care about his thoughts. Francis laughed. "I won't accompany you. I'll take Mr. Dean for a stroll. It's not too late to stroll later. Eliza will be attending today. Don't regret it if you don't go." The blonde youth joked. Francis hesitated for a moment. He turned to Dean. "Wait for me here. I'll be back soon." Chapter 455. Dean carried his backpack and waited for a moment after Francis and the blonde youth left. He saw a large number of people gathered in front of an open street. Bursts of laughter could be heard from time to time. His heart moved as he walked over with the mentality of observing and joining in the fun. "Boy, watch where you're going." A voice echoed from behind. Dean didn't look back to see that the voice belonged to a blonde youth. His face was full of arrogance. He was holding a beautiful blonde woman in his hand. There were several attendants in black suits and white gloves behind them. It was obvious that he was from an aristocratic family. Dean frowned as he stepped aside to make way. He didn't want to provoke any trouble as he had just entered the inner wall. After he stepped aside, the golden-haired young man walked over with the golden-haired beauty in his arms. He didn't even look at him. Dean came to the back of the crowd from the other side. He tiptoed slightly to look at the stage. There were a few people in strange costumes performing on it. The performance was impressively magic. Dean was startled, but soon remembered that magic was a favorite show of aristocrats. No wonder it attracted so many people to watch. If there's a magician in this world who disguises as a magician, then they can easily become a master magician and win numerous awards. Dean smiled. "Hey!" A voice echoed from the crowd. It was the blonde youth who had asked Dudien to make way. He didn't know when he appeared in front of the crowd. He looked at the magician who was performing on the stage. It's boring to transform into a bird or a flower. Let's see how you cut a living person. The middle-aged magician who was performing on the stage was startled. He quickly jumped off the stage and bowed. "Young master, we are just a small magic troupe. We didn't prepare a big sawing performance today, so we didn't bring enough props." The blonde youth didn't expect that his wish would be rejected. He raised his foot and kicked the middle-aged magician's chest. At the same time, he took out a stack of gold notes and threw them out. The gold notes scattered in the air like snowflakes covering the middle-aged magician's body. The blonde youth said coldly, "I will only say it once. I want to see it. Immediately act for me, understand?" The few people who were preparing the props on the stage jumped down in fright. They supported the middle-aged magician and kept apologizing to the golden-haired youth. Dean frowned as he looked at the scene. He didn't expect the blonde youth to be so overbearing. Such a thing rarely happened in the outer wall. Most of the nobles in the outer wall loved their face, so they wouldn't do such a shameful thing. However, he knew that he wasn't a hero, so he naturally wouldn't stand up for this kind of thing. He could only silently observe this scene. "I've already paid up. Hurry up and perform." "Perform, perform. We want to see the big saws on a living person. Hurry up." The surrounding crowd cheered, urging the middle-aged magician and the others. When the middle-aged magician and the others saw the excited crowd, their faces darkened. As a magician, how could they perform a sawing on a living person without props? This was completely unreasonable. However, when they saw the golden-haired young man's luxurious clothes and the attendants behind him, they knew that if they didn't perform today, it would be difficult for them to let this matter rest. "All right, we will perform." The middle-aged magician climbed up from the ground and came in front of the golden-haired youth. "We will prepare immediately. Please be patient and wait for a moment. I'll send someone to bring the props." The golden-haired youth looked impatient. "Are you deaf or are you out of your mind? I want to see it now. Do you want me to wait? Do you want to die or become a dog slave?" It seems quite interesting to have a dog slave who can perform magic. "Aina, do you want it?" As he said that, he tilted his head and looked at the blonde woman in his arms dotingly, his eyes filled with gentleness. "Elder, you can't do this." The middle-aged magician's face changed as he said. The blonde woman looked at him and shook her head. "I don't want such an old one. My sisters will laugh at me." The youth nodded. "That's true. I'll find a young one for you next time." "All right." The golden-haired youth turned to the middle-aged magician. "Why are you still standing here?" The middle-aged magician breathed a sigh of relief and forced a smile. He turned around and called several assistants to return to the stage. He frowned and looked worried. Such a dangerous magic trick was easy to make mistakes even with props, let alone without props. "Leader, what should we do? We don't even have a saw here. How are we going to cut a living person?" "Yes, what should we do?" The assistants looked at the middle-aged magician anxiously, but they had no idea what to do. The middle-aged magician's face was gloomy. After climbing to the stage, his eyes flashed. "I have an idea," he whispered. "Do you remember?" The assistants were stunned when they heard this, but they all heaved a sigh of relief. "Leader is smart. This is a good idea. Let's do it. I'll prepare it immediately." "Leader, isn't this too?" The middle-aged magician interrupted the last person's words. "You don't want to work anymore? Do you want to do it yourself?" The youth who spoke shrunk his neck and didn't say anything. "Everyone, we're going to cut a living person." The middle-aged magician stood on the platform and spoke to the crowd in a clear voice. At the same time, a few assistants moved the props onto the platform. It was a huge wooden box. "Next, we'll select a person from the crowd to participate in the performance. It will show that we didn't do anything." The middle-aged magician smiled and looked at the crowd that was stirred up by his words. He immediately said, "Everyone, please rest assured that this performance is not dangerous. Next, I will choose a person at random. This is a random selection. It will not be a fake." The middle-aged magician picked up a commonly used prop. He looked at the crowd and threw it towards the back. Dean noticed that the other person's eyes were locked on him. He immediately moved to the side and pulled the person next to him. Whoosh! The random selection prop was a lead-bottomed cloth ball. It seemed to float lightly, but it fell just in time to the position where Dean was standing. It was caught by the person who was dragged by Dean. He must have practiced for a long time to throw it. The person holding the softball looked at the ball in his hand. He threw it to the ground and shouted at the middle-aged magician, "Do you want to die? How did you throw it?" The middle-aged magician saw the blonde hair and couldn't help but feel embarrassed and annoyed. He quickly found Dean and pointed at him. "Little brother, can you come up and cooperate with me?" Dean just wanted to avoid this matter, but unexpectedly this person directly pointed at his head. He couldn't help but be startled, and his face suddenly became gloomy. "Didn't we agree to randomly select? What are you pointing at?" The middle-aged magician was infuriated and said with a sullen face, "You're the one who was chosen. Do you want to make everyone unhappy? I just asked you to come up and cooperate. It's your fortune to be able to perform for this young master. How dare you refuse?" Dean was so angry that he wanted to laugh. He understood that the middle-aged magician didn't prepare any props. He knew that the process would be dangerous, so he didn't choose the members of his group. Instead, he chose from the crowd. Dean had black hair. The phenomenon of using hair color to determine identity existed in the outer wall. It was even more serious here. Therefore, he was treated as a soft persimmon by the middle-aged magician. "Boy, go. You're the one who pulled me. If you don't go, then you will be in for a good time." The blond middle-aged man who threw the ball said in a harsh tone, "Yes, go. Whose family slave is this? They don't even care about it. How impolite of you to make so many people wait. How insensible." The crowd around emerged. Dean's face was gloomy as he looked at the middle-aged magician. "We need props to perform magic. You didn't prepare any props. What if there is a life danger?" The middle-aged magician didn't expect to be questioned by Dean. "We are professionals, so there won't be any danger. I said that we don't have props, but it's just a joke to increase the atmosphere. Moreover, with our skills, we can perform even without props. You don't have to worry about it." Dean found it funny. He had a little sympathy for this person, but now he had the heart to kill him. "Your technology? If you really have the skills, then show us how to make a person out of thin air. Why do you need my help? I told you to go, so go. Why are you being so long-winded?" Someone beside him said impatiently, long-winded, "Why do you have so much nonsense to say?" "That's right, whose house is this?" Middle-aged magician looked at Dean. "Don't let everyone wait. Hurry up." Dean looked at the people who were talking next to him. All of them had blonde hair. Only one of them had brown hair, but he was wearing an expensive pocket watch on his chest. Obviously, he had a background. He said in a cold voice, "If you like to go, why don't you go yourself?" "Hey, how can you talk like that? How rude. If you speak like that again, do you believe that I will discipline you on behalf of your master?" The people around Dean were angry. Dean narrowed his eyes as killing intent flashed in his eyes. He had the urge to start a massacre. But after all, he wasn't in the outer wall. He took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. "I'm not going to the outer wall." He didn't need to think to know that the magic was absolutely dangerous. The middle-aged magician dared to pick him because he knew that there would be danger. Dean couldn't find him because of his identity. This was the reason why the middle-aged magician didn't dare to pick the nobles around him. Seeing that Dean was about to leave, the onlookers immediately pointed at him. Chapter 456. Is it the Dragon Clan? It's the carriage of the Dragon Clan. Quick, get out of the way. The pedestrians on both sides of the street exclaimed as they saw the black dragon flag on the carriage. It was as if they had encountered a scourge. Dragon Clan? Dean was startled. The image of the Dragon Clan's girl flashed in his mind. He quickly moved to the side of the road to avoid the carriage. The people gathered at the roadside where the middle-aged magician was performing didn't react so quickly. Although they saw the carriage galloping over, it was too chaotic when they dispersed, causing several people to fall to the ground and grimace in pain. Right. The knight in front of the carriage tightened the rope. The horse neighed as it stopped in front of the crowd. "Bastards! Get out of the way!" The knight snapped the whip as he shouted at the people who had fallen to the ground. The people on the ground were scared as they climbed up in panic. They didn't care about the pain as they apologized and moved to the side of the road. The knight was ready to continue his journey. Suddenly, the door of the carriage was pushed open. A green figure jumped out and landed next to the knight. It was a girl who was about 15 or 16 years old. She was wearing a green cheongsam. She was lively and smart. Her eyes were full of cunning and mischievous color. She looked at the middle-aged magician and said to the knight, "Is that a magic show? I want to see it." The knight asked, "Miss, why did you come down?" "I want to see magic." The girl didn't answer the knight as she walked towards the middle-aged magician. The knight was anxious as he quickly got off the horse. "Miss, we have to hurry. I already said I want to see magic." "If you want to hurry, you can hurry yourself," the girl said in annoyance. The knight smiled as he knew that he couldn't change the girl's mind. He looked at the middle-aged magician. "Hey, didn't you hear the words of our families, miss? Hurry up and perform the magic. Be careful of your head if you don't perform well." The middle-aged magician's face turned pale. "Greetings, Miss Dragon. What kind of magic do you want to see?" The young girl rubbed her chin and thought for a moment. Then she said excitedly, "Let's see a live person. I heard that among your magic tricks, this is the most exciting. Hurry up, show me a live person." "Oomph, you have to be careful. Don't let me see through your magic tricks. If your acting is too clumsy, I'll punish you." She raised her hand and slid it across her neck. Her sparkling eyes were filled with intimidation, but together with her young and beautiful face, she gave off a kind of cute and mischievous feeling. Sawing a living person again? Middle-aged magician almost choked out blood. He regretted that he didn't bring all the props today. He looked around and saw that the crowd had dispersed. Only a few blonde nobles were left. He hesitated as he saw Dean from the corner of his eyes. He immediately bowed to the girl. "Miss, we don't have enough manpower. Can we ask this person to cooperate with us?" He raised his hand and pointed at Dean. Dean didn't expect trouble to find him even though he was so far away. His eyes flashed with killing intent. He wanted to leave as he was too lazy to take revenge. After all, he was going to leave tonight. He didn't have time to waste on these people. However, the other party had repeatedly brought trouble to him. He couldn't restrain his killing intent any longer. "Whatever. I'm waiting," the girl impatiently said. The middle-aged magician was relieved as he called his assistants. Several assistants came in front of Dean. One of them said in a cold tone, "Come over. Please cooperate with us." Dean narrowed his eyes as he saw the cold expression on the middle-aged magician's face. But he knew that the reason why the middle-aged magician dared to do this was because he knew that he would offend Miss Dragon if he resisted. Dean took a deep breath as he restrained his killing intent. A mere street magician wasn't worth offending a big force like the Dragon Clan. He said in a cold voice, "Get out of the way." The assistant's face changed. The one who spoke before angrily said, "You don't know what's good for you." Dean pushed the assistant's shoulder and strode towards the middle-aged magician. "Can we start?" The middle-aged magician's eyes were gloomy as he coldly snorted. Suddenly, a smile appeared on his face as he said, "Thank you for your cooperation. Please come inside." He opened the wooden box next to him. The assistants quickly returned to the stage to assist the middle-aged magician in his performance. "Next, miss, please enjoy the big saw." The middle-aged magician bowed to the young lady. "Stop nagging, hurry up." The young girl wrinkled her nose. The middle-aged magician's face showed a trace of awkwardness, but he quickly covered it with a smile. He turned around and winked at his assistant. He picked up the sharp sword beside him and said, "There is no bandsaw today, so I will stab someone alive. Everyone, this sword is definitely a real sword. Please take a look." As he said that, he slashed at the prop beside him. Instantly, the prop was cut in half. Dean's eyes flashed as he listened to the middle-aged magician fiddling and exaggerating the atmosphere inside the wooden box. He was thinking about ways to kill people. The middle-aged magician's opening was over and the official performance began. Dean looked at the actions of the middle-aged magician through thermal vision. Although he couldn't see the sword in the middle-aged magician's hand, but he could see every move of the middle-aged magician. He could easily judge the direction of the middle-aged magician's attack. Whoosh! The sharp sword pierced into the wooden box. Dean had anticipated it and easily dodged it. The middle-aged magician was relieved as he didn't feel that he had stabbed an object. It would be best if the magic was successful. Whoosh! The second sword pierced again. Dean dodged again. Then the third sword, the fourth sword. In the blink of an eye, 10 swords were inserted into the wooden box from all angles. The audience exclaimed in surprise. The people who had previously hidden to the side because they were afraid of this young lady of the Dragon Clan stood on the side of the road and watched from afar. Seeing this, they enthusiastically applauded and cheered. "Huh!" the young girl exclaimed in surprise, a look of surprise on her pretty face. The middle-aged magician was relieved when he saw the surprise on her face. At the same time, he felt proud as he said, "Miss, we will open the box now." He waved his hand to call his assistants. The assistants immediately stepped forward and pulled out their swords. As the swords were pulled out one by one, the assistants were all incomparably shocked. None of the swords were stained with blood. They knew that there was no mechanism in the wooden box. Soon, all the swords were pulled out, and the box was opened, revealing Dean inside. His whole body was unscathed, but his clothes were cut in a few places. As he took a step forward, the backpack on his back suddenly fell off, but it was cut, and the clothes and belongings inside suddenly fell down. Dean frowned. He bent down to pick them up. "Huh!" Suddenly, the girl in the audience exclaimed. The next moment, everyone felt a breeze pass by. The girl's figure was like a phantom as she jumped from the ground to the high platform. She said to Dean, "You, show me the thing in your hand." Dean was surprised as he saw the girl talking to him. He handed over the purple handkerchief. "This?" When the girl saw the purple handkerchief, the suspicion on her face suddenly turned into surprise. She looked up at Dean and was about to speak, but suddenly thought of something. The surprise on her face quickly disappeared, and she restored her previous smiling appearance, saying, "Nothing. I find you very pleasing to the eye. Come with me." Chapter 457. Dean still clearly remembered the little girl who took him to the Mysian orphanage in the heavy rain. She looked about the same age as him, 8 or 9 years old. She was also wearing a well-tailored and exquisite cheongsam. If he calculated her age, she should have grown into the same appearance as the girl in front of him. Moreover, he had never seen a noble wearing a unique style of cheongsam. It was incompatible with the Western-style clothes inside the giant wall. He had only seen the classic Oriental beauty on the girl in front of him and the girl in front of him. Both of them were from the Dragon Clan. It was obvious that the little girl who took him to the Mysian orphanage was from the Dragon Clan. Thinking of this, his heart thumped, and his eyes lit up. "Do you know this?" Dean asked. He was full of expectation and even a trace of nervousness. The girl winked at Dean. "Let's get in the car first. I'll talk to you later." Dean understood that this wasn't the right place to talk. He nodded and suddenly thought of something. "Although it's presumptuous, can you do me a favor?" "What favor?" The girl's eyes turned as she asked with interest. Dean said, "I want this person's life." He raised his hand and pointed at the middle-aged magician. The middle-aged magician was scared when he heard Dean's words. Cold sweat oozed out of his body as his face turned pale. The young girl pouted and said, "And here I was wondering what it was. It's just a small matter. With your skills, you should be able to kill him. If you want to kill him, then kill him. I'll cover for you." As she said that, she patted her slightly bulging chest. Dean was relieved. He saw that the girl wasn't malicious towards him. In fact, she was very interested in him. That's why he took the risk to ask. After all, he didn't know when he would be able to find the middle-aged magician if he left with her. It would take a lot of energy and time. "Miss, I didn't offend you. You can't." The middle-aged magician's legs trembled as he saw the girl agree. The knight beside him leaped forward and reached out to stop him. He said coldly, "Bastard, stay away from our Mississippi, yes, yes." The middle-aged magician trembled in fear and begged, "Miss, my magic performance was very successful. I have no enmity with him, but he wants to take my life. Miss, you can't agree. By the way, I am Baron Jesse's man. Please, for the sake of our Baron, please spare me," the girl frowned. "Can you be quiet, Baron Jesse? Who's he think he is?" The middle-aged magician's face turned pale. He was about to continue to plead. Dean looked at the girl. "Do we do it here?" "Of course, what are you afraid of? It's not a big deal to kill a pariah," the girl said in an indifferent tone. Dean was relieved. The lives of the people in the inner wall were as cheap as grass. He was no longer polite. He hooked the sword on the ground and grabbed the hilt. The moment the middle-aged magician opened his mouth, the sword pierced through the back of his head. The latter's pleading expression came to an abrupt end. There was a bit of panic and astonishment in his eyes. He bit the sword as his life quietly passed away. Dean pulled out the sword. His palm loosened at the same time, and the blood-stained sword hit the assistant next to him. Puff! The assistant's heart was pierced through the assistant's heart. The assistant was the one who had scolded Duddian earlier. He was shocked when he saw the experience of the middle-aged magician. He didn't expect Duddian to attack him. His eyes widened as the sword pierced through his chest. His body flopped down on the platform. Both of them died in an instant. Dean glanced at the girl. "I'm sorry. I accidentally killed one more." "It's okay. Can we go now?" The girl didn't care. She was only concerned about her own affairs. Dean nodded. "Let's go." The girl smiled and jumped off the platform. She hummed a song as she walked back to her carriage. The knight looked at Duddian, looked up and down for a moment, then turned around and followed behind the girl. Dean put away the things in his backpack and followed the knight. After Dean entered the carriage, the knight jumped on the horse and led the team to move forward. The people who were scattered on both sides of the street went to the center of the road after the carriage left. They looked at the direction of the carriage and talked. "Gee, I didn't expect to see the Miss of the Dragon Clan here. I think I have seen her before. Is she the second princess of the Dragon Clan? She's truly devastatingly beautiful. She's too beautiful. Be careful. She'll cut off your tongue if she hears you. The second princess of the Dragon Clan is a famous little devil. I don't know the origin of that kid. He can get the favor of the Dragon Clan. I envy him." Everyone was envious and sighed, and no one took another glance at the two corpses on the high platform. "Where did you get the handkerchief?" The smile on the girl's face disappeared as she stared at Dean. Her voice was as cold as ice. There wasn't the slightest trace of innocence from before. Dean was startled. He stared at her eyes and slowly said, "A person gave it to me." "Gave it to you?" The girl narrowed her eyes. "This belongs to the Dragon Clan. We never give it to outsiders. Do you know that if you lie to me, you will die miserably? It will be much more miserable than those two people." Dean frowned. "Someone gave it to me. You can check if you don't believe me. Your Dragon Clan's intelligence network should be able to find out who gave it to me, right?" The girl stared at him. It didn't seem like he was lying. "What did the person who gave it to you look like? What was her name? Where did she give it to you?" Dean shook his head. "It's been many years. She gave it to me 7 or 8 years ago. At that time, she was still a little girl. I've only seen her once. I haven't seen her since. I don't know her name. 7 or 8 years ago." The girl was startled. Dean's heart skipped a beat as he looked at her. "Do you remember 7 or 8 years ago in the slums of the Outer Wall? Do you remember seeing a little boy?" The girl's thoughts were pulled back by his words. She was startled once again. "Outer Wall? Are you from the Outer Wall? You can't be that little boy, right?" There was a burst of excitement in Dean's heart. "Yes, I was the little boy at that time. Do you remember me?" The girl was startled as her thoughts drifted away. 7 or 8 years ago. Outer Wall. No wonder, no wonder. Her eyes became clear as she looked at Dean. "Yes, I remember. I didn't expect to see you again after so many years. It's really great." Dean didn't expect her to be so happy. Both of them were 7 or 8 years old at that time. If it wasn't for his excellent memory from childhood, he would have forgotten about it. She was the first person he came into contact with after he came out of the freezer. However, the other party unexpectedly remembered and was even happy about it. Dean took a deep breath. "Thank you for sending me to the orphanage. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have died a long time ago. You saved my life." He wasn't being polite. Orphans like him who weren't taken in by the orphanage would be caught by the ordinary poor as free labor. Chapter 458. Moreover, judging from the chaotic order of the slums, if he was really captured by other poor people, it would be difficult for him to survive. Even if he was quick-witted, but because of the language barrier coupled with his weak body, he would soon be exhausted to death. If he encountered some cruel mobs, he would even become their food. Therefore, he had always regarded the girl who had sent him to the orphanage as his savior. She was also the only person he was truly grateful to besides Jura after he woke up. The girl was startled when she heard Dean's words. She stared at him and smiled. "I didn't expect you to remember it so clearly after so many years." Dean smiled. "There are always things that shouldn't be forgotten." The girl smiled. "I'll formally introduce myself to you. My name is Aisha. As you can see, I'm a member of the Dragon Clan. If you have any difficulties in the future, you can come to me for help at any time." Dean felt a sense of intimacy as he saw her smile. "My name is Dean. If you need any help, you can tell me. I'll help you as long as I can." Aisha blinked. "Don't you live in the Outer Wall? How did you come here?" "As far as I know, it should be very difficult for people from the Outer Wall to come here." Dean nodded. "I was brought here for some reason. I will leave tonight." "Some reason?" Aisha was startled. "Will you come back in the future?" Dean shook his head. "I don't think so." There was a trace of loss in Aisha's eyes. "Then, will you never come back?" Dean felt strange as he heard the reluctance in her voice. But at the same time, he felt a burst of warmth. "It's hard to say what will happen in the future. But as long as there is a chance, I will come back." Aisha thought for a moment. "How about you join our Dragon Clan? Then you can live in the Inner Wall. What do you think?" Dean shook his head. "I've joined the monastery." "I'm afraid, monastery?" Aisha was surprised. "So you were recruited by the monastery. I heard that the monastery had established the Holy Church in the Outer Wall. Is there a secret mission for you?" Dean nodded. Aisha was surprised. "I heard that the monastery had established the Holy Church in the Outer Wall." Dean didn't expect her to be so smart. He nodded. "You are right." Aisha's face was full of interest. "What is the task? Is it fun?" Dean frowned as he saw her crystal-clear eyes. He immediately shook his head. It's a confidential task. I can't tell you. I hope you can forgive me. Although he was grateful, but it was the first time they met. He couldn't tell her everything. It wasn't that he didn't trust her, but it was a trace of vigilance that he had developed over a long period of time. Aisha pouted. Stingy. Dean smiled. There was a trace of hesitation in his heart, but he held back after thinking about it. Haisha saw that Dudian didn't want to talk about it. I can give you a high position if you join the Dragon Clan. You can live in the inner wall. Are you willing to do that? As for the monastery, I can help you. Dudian was moved as he heard this. He wanted to live in the inner wall and get in touch with the core secrets of the giant wall. However, he would have to rely on the protection of the little girl in the future. Moreover, he knew nothing about the Dragon Clan. The only thing he knew was that the girl in the Tang suit had a super strong combat power. He judged that the Dragon Clan belonged to a very strong family of witches. Is the Dragon Clan very strong in the inner wall? Dean asked. Aisha saw the interest in Dean's eyes. Of course. Our dragon family is one of the 3 major families. We are the strongest amongst the 3 major families. It's easy for me to ask for a person from the monastery. 3 major families? Dean was surprised. Didn't it mean that there were at least 2 people who were comparable to the girl in the Tang suit? Moreover, he wasn't sure about the status of the girl in the Tang suit in the Dragon Clan. Was it the highest or the middle? If you join our Dragon Clan, we will give you the most abundant resources. Moreover, with me, you will definitely get the most intensive training. Soon, you will become an existence comparable to the mystic sect's holy master. Haisha said. At that time, no one will dare to bully you wherever you go. Dean was a little moved. Looking at her delicate and lovely face, he could vaguely see the outline of a little girl from his childhood. In a trance, the memory of that dark, rainy night emerged. He was supported by the little girl step by step towards the orphanage. His heart was slightly warm, and he deeply said, "Thank you." Aisha's eyes lit up. "Do you agree?" Dean stared at her and shook his head. "I can't promise you for the time being." "Why?" Aisha was surprised. Dean looked away. "I don't want to live in the inner wall for the time being." "You don't want to live in the inner wall?" Aisha was stunned, as it was the first time she heard such words. She said, "I won't force you since you don't want to come to the inner wall for the time being. But if you need me in the inner wall, then don't hesitate to come to me. This is the order from the Dragon Clan." She handed a medal to Dean. It was a black medal. It was engraved with a dragon pattern. Dean looked at it and reached out to take it. He remembered that the girl in the Tang suit had said the same words. He sighed and said to her, "Thank you. If there's a chance, I will definitely look for you." Aisha sighed. "It's a pity that I don't have enough authority to go to the outer wall. I can't summon you from the outer wall." Dean was surprised. "You can't go to the outer wall?" Then, Haisha shook her head. "We sneaked out. Our family can't go to the outer wall and interfere with the outer wall. I don't have the ability to call you in unless you are willing to become a member of our Dragon Clan. Otherwise, I can't call you again and again." Dean was startled. "How did you sneak out?" Dean asked. There was some curiosity and expectation in his heart. Perhaps this was a more convenient way to sneak out. Aisha shrugged her shoulders and said, "He climbed over the wall when the guards on the high wall weren't paying attention." Dean was stunned. "Climbed over the wall? You were 8 or 9 years old at that time. The height of the wall. That you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.